Chapter 1609. The God Emperor's Tomb. Even if he hadn't communicated with Gu Li, Yi Zichen was determined to enter the tomb as soon as possible. Shui Mo was still lying in bed, heavily injured. Her soul had yet to return to the river Styx. Yi Zichen's Emperor Star was keeping her alive. The Hermit Emperor had once said that there was something in the God Emperor's tomb that could truly bring Shui Mo back to life. The sooner he obtained it, the sooner Shui Mo would wake up. In order to awaken Shui Mo as soon as possible, Yi Zichen naturally spared no effort in obtaining it. Never mind whether or not he'd have to cooperate with Gu Li in the end, the two of them had the key fragments. If he wanted to open the tomb, he'd have to combine them. More importantly, he needed the key to the final floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. A ruler. Breaking through to ruler was a dream for most people. But for Yi Zichen, who had the Emperor Star's celestial fate, breaking through was as easy as turning over his hand. However, opening the final floor required more than just a ruler's cultivation. Yi Zichen estimated that even if he couldn't condense the Tao heart of the 5 elements, he'd need at least one of them to reach perfection. That was the most difficult problem to solve. The God Emperor's tomb would completely collapse within half a month, so he naturally didn't have much time left. Great Sage, Yang Jian, Jingwan. Yi Zichen muttered to himself for a moment, then looked up at them. When they heard his words, they all looked at him, then heard Yi Zichen speak. Yi Zichen said, "I'm going into seclusion. Don't disturb me, no matter what. Yang Jian, go tell the Queen Mother not to worry about the God Emperor's tomb. I'll definitely head there once I leave seclusion." All right. Hearing that, Yang Jian nodded. Yi Zichen nodded deeply. All right then. Everyone, please stand guard for me. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, Yi Zichen had been in seclusion for several days. Along the way, a few great emperors really did seek out Yi Zichen, but Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others brushed them off. However, the God Realm's internal strife only grew more and more intense. The Central Divine Mountain formed its own faction. While Yi Zichen was in seclusion, the other divine mountains found it incomprehensible. The Central Divine Mountain completely sealed itself off from the outside world. From afar, one could only see a flickering barrier of lightning sealing off the Central Divine Mountain. Outsiders had no way of knowing what was going on inside the Central Divine Mountain. No one could enter, and the people inside couldn't leave. Even the Divine Arbiter, the only person in the group who could spy on the Central Divine Mountain, had lost contact with the emperors. Presumably, this barrier that sealed off Heavenly God City would not only block divine sense signals, but even internet signals would also be cut off. As soon as the 100 Treasures trading company's Zui Mo noticed that the signal had been blocked, she immediately sent people to break it. It was just that they did not achieve good results. But the technicians did not give up. They were still thinking about how to transmit the signal. At the same time, several divine mountains in the Alliance were also sending large numbers of blacksmiths to the 100 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. It's worth mentioning that now that the Spirit Formation Master Association and the Paragon Hall had joined the Upheaval Alliance, the Upheaval Alliance's combat power had multiplied. Within a few days, the 10th Divine Mountain had gained tens of thousands of spiritual formations. It looked like it was about to become the number 1 Divine Mountain. However, the Supreme Hall was also continuously sending formation masters to the 100 Treasures Chamber of Commerce for unknown reasons. What was even more surprising was that half a year ago, the relationship between the 3 races had been ambiguous, but now, not even the slightest bit of friction had arisen between them. It was as if the 3 sides had agreed to do their own thing and not disturb each other. Back in the Sea of Innocence's Shui family's inner sect, Yi Zichen had gone into seclusion to break through. Due to his special status, the Ocean Emperor had ordered all clansmen, regardless of whether they were from the main family or branch families, to put down their weapons and return to the clan to stand guard for him. As far as the eye could see, it could be said that there were sentries every 3 steps and guards every 10. Model divine power crisscrossed each other. With such a tight defense, forget anyone trying to disrupt Yi Zichen's enlightenment. Not even a bug could escape their line of sight. While Yi Zichen was in seclusion, The venerable of numinous treasure returned from the dungeons. Ever since he'd returned, Yang Jian had been wary of him. Pu Jingwan didn't speak to him, either. Only the great sage and numinous treasure would occasionally get together to discuss the Tao of Thieves. "How long has he been in seclusion?" asked the venerable of numinous treasure. Yang Jian naturally wouldn't answer. Pu Jingwan sat on a tree trunk, eating who knew what. Only the great sage glanced at his room. "Almost half a month. That's really long." The venerable of numinous treasure frowned. The great sage couldn't help but arch his brows. "Is that really long? At his level, isn't it normal for him to go into seclusion for 100 years? "That's true, but we don't have that much time left." The venerable of numinous treasure sighed, but inwardly he couldn't help but mutter, "You'd better hurry. You'd better hurry up. You don't have much time left." Within his sea of consciousness, Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness was a sea of fire. He sat cross-legged in the midst of the primal chaos, and heavenly fire rained down around him. However, Yi Zichen's brows were deeply furrowed. Of the 5 elements, the Tao of fire he'd gained the deepest understanding of. While in seclusion, he'd wanted to study it, but half a month of seclusion had yielded little results. He desperately needed it. Even though he didn't know how much time had passed in the outside world, he knew he didn't have much time left. He couldn't afford to remain stagnant on the path of fire forever. The 5 elements' great emperor had destroyed his Tao heart of the 5 elements, so there was no way he could continue condensing it. The road ahead was full of thorns. Yi Zichen had to rely on his own experience. Although the former Emperor Hades and the Ocean Emperor had both given him pointers on the 5 elements, they each had their own great Taos. Their understandings of the 5 elements were only superficial. They might be of some help to Yi Zichen in the early stages, but in the end, he'd have to rely on himself to complete and condense his Tao heart. "Could it be that I've chosen the wrong path?" he murmured, his gaze grave. Yi Zichen had never felt himself to be particularly talented. He didn't dare compare himself to a monstrous genius like Divine Rain, who'd comprehended 3 peerless great Taos. However, he was no mediocre person. His stagnation in fire truly made him anxious. "Of course you've chosen the wrong path." Chapter 16:10. The voice in his sea of consciousness was gentle. It lingered in Yi Zichen's ears for a long time. Yi Zichen awoke from his meditation and looked around in bewilderment. He still couldn't see the speaker, but his words enlightened Yi Zichen. Indeed, this was the Sea of Innocence. All of Innocence City was surrounded by the Sea of Innocence, and this was the place with the most intense water intent. Water and fire were incompatible. If he comprehended fire intent here, he'd inevitably be suppressed by the boundless water. Naturally, he'd only get half the result with twice the effort. Before entering seclusion, Yi Zichen hadn't thought about this at all. He'd focused on breaking through the easiest aspect of fire intent, but little did he know he'd gone down the wrong path. "Senior, please enlighten me." Yi Zichen cupped his hands towards the void, then looked up into the primal chaos. To his surprise, the expert who'd guided him laughed and said, "Never mind. Forget about giving pointers to the arcane realm. Normally, I would tell you in detail, but we don't have much time now. Then, Senior, I'm here to lend you a hand. Water. Boundless water." Boundless water suddenly appeared in Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness. The heavenly fire falling from the sky was extinguished, and the raging waves enveloped him. Yi Zichen had never seen such a turbulent wave of water before. However, it was precisely this vast expanse of water that allowed his understanding of the Tao of aquatics to become extremely clear. Water is all-encompassing. It's both auspicious and dangerous. Water can nourish all things, and all things can't live without water. But water is a calamity. It's merciless. It can destroy a city or a country. How he comprehends it and chooses it is entirely up to him. I just don't know which path he'll choose. The whisper in his sea of consciousness hadn't faded. Yi Zichen was immersed in comprehending water intent, so he didn't hear it. Water intent. Was this the true intent of water? The raging waters carried with them an unstoppable force. They broke through dams and drowned an entire city. Houses collapsed, city walls were destroyed, and towering trees were uprooted. What kind of destructive power was this? In the blink of an eye, the scene in front of him changed again. What he saw was a dried-up river bank, withered branches, withered leaves, and cracked earth. The fish in the riverbed struggled, but there was no water. Only death awaited them. The scorching sun scorched the earth like a fire, evaporating every trace of water vapor here. Everything was completely different from the raging flood just now. Rain comes. Yi Zichen felt like he had to do something. As he muttered to himself, a fine rain began to fall from the vast blue sky. The dispirited elk struggled to open its eyes, and the drooping flowers and plants slowly straightened their backs. The fish in the riverbed struggled to turn, as if they were grasping the last hope of survival. Gradually, the cracked ground was moistened, and a trickle of water could be seen in the dried-up riverbed. What he saw was no longer the withered land of the past. Instead, he could see the trickling water, the singing of birds, and the fragrance of flowers. He could see the elk drinking by the riverbank, and he could also see the fish swimming in the clear stream. The sun was shining brightly. It was a peaceful scene, without embroiling city. Whoosh! Pu Jingwan, who'd been snacking on a tree branch, jumped down and held up a barrier with her hands. She continued munching on her snacks, completely oblivious to the suddenness of the rain. The other rulers instinctively shielded themselves from the rain. No one hated the feeling of being soaked. However, as the rain fell, the surrounding flowers and trees grew even more vigorously. The rain wasn't just limited to without embroiling city. It enveloped the entire sea of innocence as well, and they could see countless sea monsters leaping out of the water. The northwest divine mountain, the northeast divine mountain, the southwest divine mountain, and the southeast divine mountain. The Yao race's southern divine kingdom. The Yao race's northern divine kingdom. The demons. The rain actually irrigated the three realms. Under the irrigation of the rain of recovery, even the yellow sands were dyed with a touch of green. Countless major powers stared blankly at this spring-like rain of restoration, but in their hearts, they were all thinking the same thing. Perfect water intent. I can't believe you've comprehended auspicious rain. The venerable of numinous treasure looked at the room in front of him and chuckled. Generally speaking, perfect water intent focused on ominous water. In other words, calamitous water. The Sea Emperor of the Sea of Innocence had comprehended calamitous water, which was why he could summon wind and rain in the seas. In his hands, the once gentle waters had transformed into the sharpest of weapons. Yi Zichen had comprehended auspicious water. The venerable of numinous treasure couldn't help but smile. The Emperor's star didn't choose you for no reason at all. At the end of the day, water was meant to nourish all things. Between auspicious water and calamitous water, who wouldn't like auspicious water? Little did he know, within Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness, the expert who'd given him pointers was muttering the same thing. Auspicious rain. Yi Zichen was still immersed in his own inner world. He looked blissfully at the mellow, auspicious scene, but at that moment, he was suddenly startled awake. I'm sorry for interrupting your enlightenment. Being interrupted was the most infuriating thing. But even though it was that senior who'd interrupted him, Yi Zichen didn't feel the slightest bit angry. If it weren't for that expert, he might still be stuck in a dead-end studying fire. Even if he'd thought about the abundance of water here, he absolutely wouldn't have understood it as deeply as he'd just experienced enlightenment. Senior, you're truly unworthy of this junior. If it were you, I might have stagnated. You've comprehended auspicious water. It's clear that you're a pure and kind person. You truly are compassionate and compassionate, said the expert in his sea of consciousness. Auspicious water? Yi Zichen paused for a moment. Just now, this junior did indeed see auspicious signs, but I also sensed a sense of decay and a surging flood. You saw calamitous water? The expert in his sea of consciousness was stunned, but he quickly heard Yi Zichen laugh. What do you think? Water can nourish all things, but it can also destroy all things, said Yi Zichen. That's right, laughed the expert. You You might have noticed that among the 5 elements, lightning is the strongest in terms of attack. However, calamitous water is the hardest to defend against. To be able to comprehend both auspicious water and calamitous water, you've truly impressed me. How you'll use the true intent of water in the future will depend on yourself. That's up to you. It's just as you said, water can save people, but it can also harm them. This junior will remember that. Yi Zichen cupped his hands towards the primal chaos. Senior, may I know your name? If you hadn't shown me the right way, I really wouldn't have known what to do. You don't need to know my name, said the expert in the primal chaos. You only need to remember that this emperor has helped you twice before. When this emperor needs you to repay me, just don't let this emperor's heart turn cold. Senior. Chapter 16:11. Creak. The door gently pushed open. It was still drizzling outside. Yi Zichen never would have guessed that the true intent of water he'd comprehended in his sea of consciousness would manifest outside as well. The rain has stopped. A soft and slow chant was spat out from his mouth. It was like a mantra, and the hazy drizzle in the air instantly dissipated. Whether it was the upper 3 realms, not a single drop of rain fell from the sky. The radiant sun hung high in the sky, and the dazzling rainbows shone even more brilliantly than before. Yi Zichen retracted the rein and couldn't help but close his eyes. Is this what it feels like to be a ruler? Comprehending the true intent of water had helped Yi Zichen break through to the ruler realm. Although his soul power had broken through long ago, he was still quite a ways off. Now that he'd truly broken through, he discovered that the difference between the diviner realm and the ruler realm was like a chasm between heaven and earth. When he was a diviner, he'd clearly sensed the laws binding him. But now he felt as if he could control the entire world if he willed it. This was a ruler's domain. However, apart from that, he also felt that the restraints of the rules on him were even more severe. This was understandable. In the eyes of the laws, millions of cultivators were nothing more than slaves. Before he broke through to the sovereign realm, in the eyes of the laws, he was an unremarkable nobody. He posed no threat to the laws. Those who broke through were like slaves armed with weapons. If they could harm the laws, they'd inevitably be taken seriously and suppressed even more severely. He'd just broken through, and this was already the case. Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others might be suppressed even more severely. But the more it was like this, the more people wanted to break free. No wonder everyone wanted to transcend. Yeezy, did you succeed? Yang Jian and the others, who'd been standing guard outside, immediately rushed to Yi Zichen's side. They knew full well why he'd entered seclusion. Yi Zichen looked up into the sky and noticed the existence of dozens of rulers. No need to think too much about it. This was Shui Yang's territory. Naturally, this was the Ocean Emperor's command. What a grand spectacle. Yi Zichen couldn't help but shake his head and smile. I guess I succeeded. Alliance head Yi. The rulers descended from the sky as well. Yi Zichen recognized the first one. It was none other than the Shui family's 3rd elder, who'd met him not long ago. 3rd elder. Yi Zichen cupped his hands. In truth, Yi Zichen had only met the 3rd elder once. When his identity was revealed, the 3rd elder couldn't help but be shocked. Then he smiled. I didn't expect Lord Yi to still remember this old man. As soon as he finished speaking, the 3rd elder spoke again. Since Alliance Master Yi has come out of seclusion, we won't disturb you any longer. If Alliance Master Yi needs any assistance, feel free to contact this old man. This old man will do his best to cooperate. Thank you. The Shui family's experts all retreated, but before they left, there were still a few who stayed behind to secretly protect them. After witnessing everything, the venerable Lord of Numinous Treasure also walked over and nodded in praise like an elder. To be able to comprehend the true meaning of water in such a short period of time, you're truly a peerless genius, especially since you comprehended auspicious water. Not bad. Yi Zichen wasn't surprised in the slightest. Given his cultivation, it was only natural that he'd seen through the rain just now. It was just that he'd also comprehended calamitous water, but he'd never mentioned it to the venerable lord. There were bound to be plenty of people out there who could tell that the rain was auspicious water but they'd never heard of calamitous water. Who knew? In the future, calamitous water might become his trump card. Venerable Lord of numinous treasure, you praise me too much. In truth, I only broke through because of an expert's guidance. If not for that expert, I might still be stuck trying to comprehend the true meaning of fire, said Yizichin. Comprehending the true meaning of fire in the sea of innocence. The venerable Lord of numinous treasure truly was at the apex of the pyramid of experts. As soon as Yizichin said this, he couldn't help but laugh. That's right, said Yizichin with a bitter smile. It's not like I can't understand why you do this. When I looked at your Tao of the 5 elements, you did indeed comprehend fire the most. It's only natural that you be blind. The venerable Lord of numinous treasure sneered at Yizichin. It's just that I'm quite curious about that expert you mentioned. You saw the situation outside just now, right? Dozens of rulers locked down the divine senses of the outside world, and all of us were paying close attention. I can't believe someone managed to escape all of our attention and enter your sea of consciousness to give you pointers. Did you tell me his name? No. Even if I didn't say it, I'd have an idea. The venerable Lord of numinous treasure laughed enigmatically. Senior, do you know who that expert is? Asked Yizichin. In the 3 realms of Yao and Demon, even if you count those reclusive old geezers, there are only a handful of people who could have entered your sea of consciousness without my notice. However, since he's unwilling to tell me, there's no need for me to. Besides, he'll be coming to you soon, and then you'll know of him. When that happens, you'll naturally know his identity. From the venerable Lord of numinous treasure's words, it was clear that he really did know who that expert was. Before he left, that expert had said that he'd come to the divine mountains to find him soon. Earlier, the Hermit Emperor had said something similar, but none of the major powers had said a word about that expert's identity. This distressed Yizichin, but at the same time, he was filled with anticipation. However, what he needed to do now wasn't to figure out who that expert was. What he needed to do most urgently was open the final floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. That was the final fragment of the key to the God Emperor's tomb, as well as the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's strongest combat power. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda appeared with a flip of his hand. The pitch-black pagoda was still covered in rust, but after opening the 3rd floor, it seemed a bit more translucent. Yizichin didn't hesitate for too long. In front of everyone, he entered the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Everyone present had been by his side this entire time, so they knew exactly what Yizichin wanted to do. They didn't need to explain too much. Yang Jian and the great sage tacitly sealed off their surroundings with their divine senses. By now, Yizichin had arrived at the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's palace. The first 3 floors had already been converted into a separate space. All that was left before him was a staircase. He walked up the staircase, which ended in front of a glowing blue door. Yizichin took a deep breath, then stood in front of the door for a long time. Right now, the true intent of water and the ruler realm were his strongest trump cards. He was worried that they wouldn't be enough to open the door, so all he could do was pray. Chapter 16:12. The final floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was completely different from the previous floors. So long as you entered, you'd see a large number of Yao servants roaming the courtyard. After that, the commander of that floor would lead an army of Yao to kowtow to them. Compared to the previous floor's bustling activity, the final floor was much quieter. There was a winding cobblestone path in front of the door, and a lush bamboo forest surrounded it. Birds chirped, and the fragrance of flowers filled the air. The previous few floors were busy with alchemy, weapon refining, and talisman refining, but the feeling it gave people here was relaxing and comfortable. Yizichin sensed the comfort, but he wasn't here for a vacation. Is anyone here? After walking for a full 10 minutes, Yizichin had practically walked every corner of the bamboo garden's cobblestone path, but he didn't see a single person. Rustle. A cool breeze came from somewhere and blew through the bamboo forest, causing the surrounding bamboo leaves to rustle. Before long, 4 buildings appeared before Yizichin, one at each corner of the garden. Subordinate Yong Ran greets you, my lord. Subordinate Kai Hua greets you, my lord. Subordinate Bai greets you, my lord. Subordinate Winley greets you, my lord. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several afterimages flashed past Yi Zichen's eyes. When he came to his senses, he saw 3 men and a woman kneeling before him. He'd finally seen them. Yi Zichen couldn't help but mutter to himself. He glanced at the 4 buildings that had appeared out of nowhere. It seemed that the 4 of them lived on the final floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. However, judging from their auras, their cultivations weren't as high as he'd imagined. Their realms were no different from that of ordinary sovereigns. The only emperor among them was the woman, and she was probably an empress. The other one was a god general. Although the quality of the Yao servants on the final floor disappointed him, Yi Zichen's goal was to obtain the fragment of the god emperor's key. Which one of you has the key fragment? Yi Zichen got right to the point. You must be joking, my lord. How could we possibly have something as precious as the god emperor's key fragment? The only female Yao servant laughed bitterly. Yi Zichen froze. If they said that, didn't that mean there's someone else here? Someone's here. Before Yi Zichen even finished speaking, Yi Zichen was already a stalwart man in the bamboo forest. He was around 7 feet tall, with a waist so wide that even an adult could barely wrap their arms around it. His limbs were so strong that Yi Zichen could feel the ground tremble as he walked on the cobblestone path. An expert. The moment the man appeared, Yi Zichen was certain that he was definitely an incredible expert. Based on a rough estimate, his realm was probably not lower than Yang Jian's. Looks like this is the descendant who inherited the 5 elements demon suppression tower. After the boorish man appeared, another middle-aged man wearing a green robe appeared in the bamboo garden. From the beginning to the end, there was a mellow smile on his face, giving people a very amiable feeling. Brother Lon. When the burly man saw the middle-aged man, he laughed and walked over. The 2 of them walked side by side. When the 4 demon servants saw the 2 of them, they all revealed respectful expressions and retreated to another place. It was obvious that Yi Zichen was the master of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, but it was clear that the 4 Yao servants feared these 2 even more. At that moment, the 2 of them arrived in front of Yi Zichen. Only now did Yi Zichen realize just how tall the man was. He stood in front of him like a small mountain. Even with Yi Zichen's height, he couldn't even reach his chest. Add to that the fact that Yi Zichen was relatively thin, and standing in front of the burly man made him seem even more fragile. Are you the new owner of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda? The burly man's voice boomed like thunder. Even at Yi Zichen's cultivation, he felt his heart tremble. He narrowed his eyes and subtly used his divine power to block out the sound waves, then nodded. That's me. Heh, at least you've got some skill, snorted the burly man, then said no more. Little friend, please don't take it to heart. Song Xiong's always been like this, and he's always had a grudge against 5 elements. You're the current owner of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. So, in contrast to the burly man's disdain, the middle-aged man in green robes was much more amiable. Let me introduce myself. I'm Qing Lan, and I've lived the longest. Everyone gives me face and calls me Brother Lan. Hello. Yi Zichen nodded. As for this seemingly simple-minded guy, he's no less cunning than the others. His name is Song Xiong, and his true form is a mutated ironback bear. He should be at the Imperial Emperor level right now, and he's comprehended the true intent of strength, said Qinglan. Song Xiong arched his brows and snorted. Look at you. You've only just become a ruler. Seriously, the current owner of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda is so weak. Don't think I'll risk my life for you. Even when 5 Elements was in trouble, I didn't help. Not to mention, you've only just become a ruler, and your cultivation hasn't even stabilized yet. Stubborn little thing. Song Xiong, growled Qinglan. It was obvious that Song Xiong was terrified of Qinglan. So long as he shouted at him, Song Xiong instantly shut his mouth. However, he still looked at Yi Zichen with disdain. I still don't know your name, little friend, said Qinglan with a smile. Yi Zichen, little friend Yi, please don't take Song Xiong's earlier words to heart. We're Yao beasts of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, so we naturally serve the bearer. However, Song Xiong and I are different from the other Yao servants. We only serve the bearer once in our lives. Back then, when the Five Elements Demon Emperor fought. We had already fought once. That's why we didn't help him before he died. Please don't overthink things, said Qinglan. So that means after you help him once, you won't help him even if he's in danger? Asked Yi Zichen. You could say that. Although Qinglan was all smiles, he didn't hesitate in the slightest when he answered. Yi Zichen nodded. He didn't know how the Five Elements Great Emperor had managed to capture and bring them here, but since they were experts, it was only natural that they had a temper. Besides, he really didn't expect them to do anything. He was no longer the poor, penniless youth he'd once been. He had Yang Jian, the great sage, and Pu Jingwan by his side, as well as several great emperors in the alliance. What would he do without them? Little did he know, as soon as this thought crossed his mind, Qinglan chuckled and said, "Little friend, you can't have such thoughts. Little friend, you can't have such thoughts. Even though there are many almighty beings around you, we can really save your life when you are in danger." Chapter 16:13. Transcendence. This was a realm above rulers, a supreme realm. Throughout the long river of history, only the first era's Lord of the Stars had succeeded in reaching this level. This level was unheard of in the Third Era. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be stunned by Qinglan's calm tone. He couldn't believe that this expert, who looked just like an imperial emperor, was so confident that he could save his life in the face of Transcendence expert. "Brat, what's wrong with you? You don't believe Big Brother Lon?" Song Xiong swung his fist and charged forward. Even though he did not feel any divine power being injected into his fist, the space around him was as fragile as a piece of paper. Coupled with his bulging eyes, which were as wide as copper bells, it was truly a frightening sight to behold. Song Xiong wasn't trying to pick a fight. When Yi Zichen heard Qinglan's explanation, a hint of disbelief flashed through his eyes. This was very difficult to conceal. When one clearly knew that the Transcendence realm was a supreme realm, and an imperial monarch actually told one that he could save one's life when facing the Transcendence realm, one would feel that the imperial monarch was boasting shamelessly. "Song Xiong, you don't know how to appreciate favors." As soon as Qinglan glared at him, Song Xiong snorted angrily and lowered his fist. In the end, Song Xiong even cursed him. Qinglan was displeased. "Little friend Yi, it's fine if you don't believe me. Besides, it's far too difficult to become a Transcendence expert. Little friend Yi, you only need to remember that we'll help you out once. Anything else is not for you to worry about." Qinglan smiled at Yi Zichen, giving him a good impression of her. When he heard this response, Yi Zichen swallowed his questions about how he could be so confident. However, Yi Zichen wasn't completely unconvinced, since he'd said that there was no reason for him to be so confident. Besides, it was just as he'd said. Encountering Transcendence experts was far too difficult. If he called them out when he was in dire straits, who knew? Who knew? The green-clothed Qinglan cupped his hands together toward Qinglan and spoke with a mellow smile. "Before I came here, I heard that you're here for the God Emperor's tomb's key fragment?" "That's right." Yi Zichen's expression instantly froze. "Senior, may I ask if you have the key fragment?" "You have to." Before Qinglan could speak, Yi Zichen noticed a flash of light from the corner of his eye. After that, he sensed a stream of air assaulting him from behind. This stream of air felt like it had been formed by a sharp object piercing through space. However, this sharp object was too fast, to the point that he was unable to react before it had already arrived at his back. This was the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. All the demon servants in the pagoda regarded him as their leader. Although the two demon emperors, Qinglan and Song Xiong, were not as subservient as the previous demon servants, they would not plot against him. At this moment, someone actually wanted to kill him. The qi in his body instantly condensed into an astral wall. Everything was as he had sensed. There was indeed a sharp weapon coming at him from behind, but the sharpness of the weapon was far beyond his imagination. The astral wall he condensed was pierced through in an instant. "Xianyuan!" Yi Zichen roared inwardly. The Xianyuan sword instantly appeared on his back, but before it could leave its scabbard, Qinglan had already reached behind him and firmly grabbed the sharp weapon. After all, whether it was Yi Zichen condensing an astral wall or summoning the Xinyuan sword. Everything happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. However, the azure-robed expert in front of him moved even faster than his thoughts. This guy. Qinglan shook his head and smiled wryly. Song Xiong snorted. That firebird did something I've always wanted to do, but never dared. A firebird. It was obvious that the firebird Song Xiong spoke of was a Yao from the 4th floor of the Yao ceiling pagoda, and had yet to show its face. Combined with what he'd just said, it seemed that this firebird really did want to kill him. Don't spout nonsense. Qinglan glared at Song Xiong, then glanced at the northwest building. You're not going to come out and meet me? I might as well not meet you. A voice suddenly echoed through the air. And here I thought the successor of the 5 elements would be an extraordinary genius, but it seems that's all there is to it. How disappointing. Qinglan and Song Xiong agreed to help you, but don't think that I'll do the same. If you were an extraordinary genius, then forget it. Such a mediocre person isn't worthy of my help. Yi Zichen stood in the middle of the bamboo garden, speechless. He'd never said how monstrous his talent was, but even amongst the god, Yao, and demon races, he was a genius. He'd broken through to ruler in 100 years. Any family would devote all of their resources to nurturing someone like that. The great emperors often praised him. Although Yi Zichen knew that was a bit of a compliment, he couldn't deny that his talent was extraordinary. When he'd first ascended the Divine Mountains, didn't he get a crystal card with the word absolute on it? But now that they were on the 4th floor of the Yao ceiling pagoda, they were clearly Yao servants bound by the Yao ceiling pagoda. Yi Zichen, as the pagoda's owner, could be considered their master in name. Yet, they'd insulted him to the point of no return. They didn't know how to appreciate favors. They were nothing more than that. Mediocre people, unworthy of fighting. Yi Zichen was truly curious. Why on earth had the 5 elements' great emperor captured these arrogant fellows when he was alive? Was he here to make trouble for his descendants? Or perhaps the 5 elements' great emperor had never even considered the possibility of his death. He'd wanted to recruit these Yao servants while he was still alive, but his luck had run out and he'd fallen at Zhou Wu's hands? Third Zhu, you're going a bit too far, aren't you? Laughed Qinglan. I've always said what I wanted to say. Mediocre people are mediocre people. Just because he's the owner of the Yao ceiling pagoda, do I have to bow and scrape up to him? Not even the 5 elements' great emperor could do that, let alone a useless brat like him. He had to endure. Even a clay figurine had a temper, and Yi Zichen was the Emperor Star's lord. Yi Zichen was infuriated to hear the Yao servants criticize him so thoroughly, but he had to admit one thing. His cultivation really wasn't as high as the Yao emperors on the 4th floor. Don't be fooled by the fact that he'd never shown his face, given that he was on equal footing with Qinglan and Song Xiong. He obviously had some strength. Their goal here was to retrieve the key fragment. If they wanted to spout nonsense, so be it. At most, they'd never see each other again. Third Zhu. That's enough, said Qinglan, trying to smooth things over. The voice transmission in the void was followed by another cold snort. I can't be bothered to speak to such a mediocre person. I've already given you the key fragment of the God Emperor's tomb that Wuxing gave me before he died. Don't disturb my cultivation in the future. I don't care if you live or die, but don't bother me. Chapter 16:14. Qingyu Village. The once unknown village, due to its geographical location, was large enough to accommodate thousands of households, but there were less than 100 households in the village. In the immortal region, where every inch of land was worth gold, this was a rare situation. Although there were not as many arrays here as in the city that could facilitate the absorption of spiritual energy, it should be noted that it would cost a lot of money to live in the city. Most of the people here were at the spiritual body or pseudo-spiritual body realm. Even the experts of the Earth Immortal realm were rarely able to live permanently in the city. The village near the city was actually the best choice for these people. More importantly, after the awakening of the Dragon Vein, the village was nourished by the Dragon Vein. Logically speaking, there should be a lot of people living in a village, but the population of the village was still pitifully small. This was all because of the village's location, the Howling Canyon that was classified as a forbidden area by the Immortal region. Because it was too close to the Howling Canyon, even though the village was nourished by the dragon vein, there was still no residents. Even the new generation of the village would try their best to leave the village. So the development of the village was getting worse and worse, from the hundreds of households before to less than 100 households now. But it was such a village at this time. Village chief, there's another group of people outside who want to stay. A young man ran into the village, his eyes flashing with some difficulty. The young man's name was Bayu, and he was born and raised in Qingyu village. As he had just stepped into the spiritual body realm, he didn't have enough ability to leave the village. Since he was young, he had been facing the households in the village, but not long ago, there were suddenly many guests who came to stay in the village. Bayu, who had never seen so many strangers, was very excited, and the village chief also warmly welcomed these guests. But who would have thought that the previous group of guests was just the beginning, and later, more and more guests came to the village. Among these guests, he also saw too many novel treasures that he had never seen before, and heard more and more stories about the outside world. He was very happy that there were more people in the village, but as the guests kept coming in, this young man, who was full of curiosity towards outsiders, began to feel a little difficult. There were too many people coming. In just half a month, the 1,000 guest rooms in the village were already full. Many of the tourists had even laid down their beds on the ground in the village. Even though the village chief had clearly stated that the village was already full, those people still used force to force their way in. Many of them had even forcibly occupied the rooms of the original villagers in the village. The travelers who had stayed here before, the ones who had talked and laughed with the villagers. No one gave them a helping hand, and they all looked on coldly from the side. The villagers had thought about fighting back, but the cultivation levels of those who came were simply too high. There were human immortals, heavenly immortals, and even a few immortal kings amongst them. Even their village chief was only an earth immortal expert. How could he deal with so many experts? The only way was to retreat. However, their concession was met with the insatiable demands of the passengers. Let them come. If they want to stay, let them. If they like someone's house, let them give it up. Don't bother with them. The old village chief looked out the window with a pipe in his mouth and let out a long sigh. Grandpa village chief, there are many people in the village who are with the tourists, I know. That's their choice, so I let them be. To them, this is not necessarily a bad thing. The old village chief gave a faint smile. He was very clear about what Bayu wanted to say to him. There were indeed many experts who came to Azure Rain Village recently. There were also many villagers who seized this opportunity and befriended those experts, becoming their subordinates. This was all unavoidable. Everyone had their own ambitions. Even as the village chief, he couldn't say anything. Moreover, the current Azure Rain Village was no longer the Azure Rain Village of the past. His position as the village chief had long since ceased to exist in name. Grandpa Village Chief. Bayu looked at the old village chief with a bitter expression. Previously, he was the happiest when people stayed, but now he was the most unhappy. He lowered his head and looked at the shadows of the immortals flying past, as well as the sounds of fighting that could be heard from time to time. This youth, who was filled with curiosity towards the outside world, had an indescribable feeling. He felt very uncomfortable. Grandpa Village Chief, when do you think they can leave? Why, weren't you very happy at the start? The old village chief smiled lightly and said, We probably won't be able to leave in a short period of time, at least not before the tomb in the canyon opens. No, if the tomb opens, there might be even more people here, and our Cyan Rain Village will have to migrate. Who knows? We have to leave? Bayu was startled. Why should we leave? Our ancestors have lived here for generations. This is our route. Why should we leave? Could it be those immortals outside? Why do they have to chase us away? You're still too young. You see everything too simply. The old village chief spat out a wisp of green smoke from the pipe in his mouth. That pair of hands that were as dry as tree bark gently pressed against the windowsill. The appearance of the secret realm will inevitably lead to fights. Our village's foundation is still too weak. They can stop us from leaving, but when they fight without enough strength, we won't be able to remain unscathed. What's more, if they really want us to leave, do you think they will preach to us? Is that reasonable? Why not? The quarrels between the villagers are all reasonable. Grandpa Village Chief will also come forward to mediate. Bayou said, "This is different." The old village chief rubbed Bayou's head again. At this moment, the old village chief's room door was suddenly kicked open. The broken wooden door was smashed to the ground. A ray of sunlight shone in from the outside. Standing in front of the door were two tall and sturdy men. They looked like twins. They were both bare-chested and carried a battle axe on their back. They looked majestic. Judging from their aura, they were probably two immortal king experts. A bunch of fools. There's clearly such a good room in the village. Yet, you want to snatch the shack outside. The man wearing red trousers on the left snorted. Then the battle axe on his back was taken off. He pointed at the old village chief and Bayou arrogantly. "Hurry and scram. This room is mine and my second brother's." "Who are you people?" "This is Grandpa Village Chief's room. If you want to stay, go and discuss with other people. Otherwise, go and sleep on the floor." "Why should Grandpa Village Chief's room be given to you?" Bayou glared at them and scolded. "Ha! Why?" "Because of the battle axe in Grandpa's hand." The man in red trousers waved his battle axe lightly. The wooden table in the room was directly cut in half. Bayou's eyes turned red. One must know that everything in this room was personally made by the old village chief. "You, big brother, why are you wasting words with them? Just chop them down." The moment he said that, the man wearing blue trousers swung the battle axe in his hand towards Bayou without hesitation. The old village chief hurriedly reached out to hug Bayou. But his realm, Mantis trying to stop a chariot. The man in blue trousers smiled indifferently. Just as the spiritual energy was about to land in front of the old village chief and Bayou. Chapter 16:15. The Immortal King level expert's attack was dissolved with a wave of his hand. Not only that, the smashed axe energy did not scatter to other parts of the room, as if it had been annihilated into thin air. "Who dares to spoil the fun of us brothers?" The man in red pants frowned, his eyes flashing with darkness and arrogance. This person's angry shout also caused many people in the village to gather around. Seeing that it was actually the two of them, they all revealed looks of surprise. There are still people who dare to provoke the twin axes. These two are people who cannot be provoked. Even the heads of the top powers would not dare to cause trouble for them. That's right. This time, someone's going to be unlucky. Although the appearance of the dragon vein brought the lower three realms into a golden age, and experts who entered the immortal realm appeared like mushrooms after the rain, immortal kings were still very rare in this age of prosperity. The two people with the axes were twin brothers, nicknamed the Twin Axes. They were quite famous in this part of the immortal region. The two of them did not establish any factions, and looking at the entire three realms, there were few people or powers who dared to provoke them. The barefooted did not fear those who wore shoes. The two brothers were all alone in the world. Both of them were immortal kings, so if they went to cause trouble, it would be hard for them. Standing in front of the old village chief, and Bayou was a valiant woman with short hair. She had a pair of sword-like eyebrows that were not inferior to a man's, and her sharp eyes looked like they were about to spit fire as she stared at the twin brothers in the room. Beside her stood a young girl with a tranquil face. Her smiling face gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. When the short-haired girl was confronting the twin brothers, she had been comforting Bayou and the old village chief with a smile. Afterwards, she looked at the short-haired girl in front of her with a worried expression. "Big Sister Xiaoyu, are you hurt? These two idiots want to hurt me." The short-haired woman snorted. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. It's actually the two Alliance Masters of Leisure House." The appearance of these two women caused the twin brothers to restrain themselves a little, but the compliment only lasted for a moment. After a slight smile, they regained their arrogant gazes. "But even if it's the two Alliance Masters, it's still a little too much. Isn't a little too wide. It's actually the two Alliance Masters of Leisure House." The spectators outside couldn't help but have looks of surprise on their faces. The twin axes were truly terrifying in the immortal realms. Countless major powers had a headache dealing with them, and the only ones who could truly disregard them were the Leisure Lodge and the other lords of the Alliance. The emergence of the Dragon Vein had doubled the number of experts in the lower realm, and new forces had also sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. The Leisure House was the foundation Yi Zichen had left behind before he ascended, and with the support of the Treasure Tower's resources, it was now an unshakable force in the Immortal Region. Not only that, but a few years ago, the Leisure House merged with the 100 Flowers Gate, a peak power of the Immortal Region. Now, the Upheaval Alliance was nicknamed Upheaval. Each and every one of the Upheaval Alliance's factions could be considered an outstanding talent. Their merger immediately caused a huge stir in the Immortal Region. The twin brothers caused many factions to suffer, but the Upheaval Alliance wasn't one of them. However, everyone knew that Twin Axes had a violent temperament. His temper was bigger than the heavens themselves. Twin Axes and the Upheaval Alliance had never encountered him before, but this time, it seemed the Twin Axes didn't want to give face to the Upheaval Alliance. There was bound to be a good show ahead. As the Twin Axes spoke, they mobilized the immortal spiritual energy in their bodies. Several runes appeared on the axes in their hands. If they joined their axes together, they could form a complete diagram. Their surging auras caused the earth in the village chief's mud house to shake and fall. The short-haired woman tilted her chin up and glared at them viciously. She wouldn't budge an inch. So what if I'm lenient? Do you two want to try? Vice Alliance head, please enlighten us. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them suddenly disappeared from the room with their axes in their hands. Don't be fooled by their appearance. Just because they looked rugged and wielded axes didn't mean their fighting style was wild and unrestrained. On the contrary, they relied on speed to win. It was also because of their speed that they attracted the wrath of other major powers. Sometimes, they smashed into their headquarters, then ran away. No one could catch up to them. That was the main reason why the heads of major powers gave them headaches. The twin axes darted through the room like phantoms. The village chief's mud house couldn't be considered spacious. It was only a few dozen square meters, but the two brothers were able to move through it so quickly that they didn't clash. Ha, petty tricks. When the short-haired woman saw this, she squatted in a horse stance and held her sword horizontally in her hand. In the face of the twin axes, her eyes didn't waver in the slightest. She just looked straight ahead. You two, stop right there. Someone shouted angrily through the air. Then they saw a hand condensed entirely of immortal spiritual energy descend from the heavens. It came crashing down. When the hand landed, it passed right through the mud house. It didn't damage it in the slightest. The twin brothers, however, were slammed to the ground. Only then did they see a red-robed, middle-aged man appear in front of the mud house. Great Emperor Qingming, is this the immortal region you control? Suddenly, a low voice rang out in everyone's ears. This whisper was clearly not directed at them, but it was as if the whisper was whispering into their ears, allowing them to hear it clearly. Countless people looked to the side in bewilderment and found that the people beside him were also looking at him in shock. Who was the person who spoke? What kind of divine ability was this? Countless people muttered in their hearts. However, many of them were already stunned in the air. Just now, the person whispering in their ears mentioned Great Emperor Qingming. There was only one Great Emperor Qingming in the entire Immortal Region. He was the Great Emperor of the sacred land of the Immortal Region. He was also the current ruler of the Immortal Region. Great Emperor Qingming. The twin brothers' eyes were filled with shock. They could look down on the leaders of the factions in the Immortal Region. However, when faced with the sacred land of the Immortal Region, the current supreme commander of the Immortal Region, Great Emperor Qingming, they didn't dare to act rashly no matter how arrogant they were. The two brothers lay on the ground, burying their heads in the ground. Great Emperor Qingming didn't even look at them. At this moment, another group of people appeared in the sky. These people were obviously led by a white-robed young man. When Great Emperor Qingming saw him, he bowed deeply. I'll let you see a joke. No worries. In the future, the Immortal Region will still be ruled by you. Just manage it well in the future. It was still the same indifferent tone. It was still like a whisper, The audience instantly realized that the person who spoke was this young man. However, this young man, he actually made Great Emperor Qingming bow. Who exactly was he? Chapter 16:16. Yi Zichen hovered in the air outside the mud hut. Unsurprisingly, Yang Jian, the great sage, Pu Jingwan, and the sovereign of numinous treasure, stood beside him. Apart from them, there were quite a few others. They concealed their auras, so the village's immortals had no idea how powerful they were. However, when they saw the others besides Yang Jian and the others, the Lotus Emperor, the Flame Emperor, he was an immortal king expert who'd risen to prominence in the immortal region half a year after the demon's invasion. The Flame Emperor didn't need to be mentioned. He'd long since made his name in the immortal region. He was on the same level as Fuxi and Suiren. However, not long ago, Fuxi, Suiren, and many other experts ascended to the god realm, leaving behind only the Flame Emperor. Of course, the villagers still cared about Yi Zichen's identity. Big brother Zichen, it's really you. The girl ran out of the hut and stood in front of the door for a long time. She stared blankly at Yi Zichen, and after a while, she finally confirmed it was him. Her pretty eyes misted over, and she pushed off the ground with the tips of her feet and pounced at Yi Zichen. It's really you. The newcomer was none other than Xueqi's little sister, Xuelon. It had been 100 years since they'd last seen each other, but it seemed as if she'd never grown up. Why do you still like to cry so much? Yang Jian smiled and gently wiped away her tears. However, the great sage and Yang Jian felt an inexplicable, cold aura wash over them. They glanced over and saw Pu Jingwan gnashing her teeth and clenching her fists. She glared at Yi Zichen and Xuelon in his arms. Yang Jian and the great sage glanced at each other. Their shoulders trembled inexplicably, but they said nothing. They could talk about other things, but when it came to matters of the heart, it was best not to butt in. Little did they know, there was a woman standing in front of the hut, staring intently at Yi Zichen. It was the valiant, short-haired woman from before. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she simply bit her lip and watched silently. She didn't take even half a step closer. Lil Yu, I didn't think you'd become an immortal king too. At that moment, Yi Zichen and the others descended from the sky. When he reached the short-haired woman, Yi Zichen smiled and nodded at her. So what if you've become an immortal king? The distance between the two of us is getting bigger and bigger. Lil Yu's expression was somewhat desolate. Pu Jingwan's expression darkened even further. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people around, she really would have pinched Yi Zichen by the ear and asked him just how many girls he'd offended. A woman's intuition was always sharp. Even though Pu Jingwan hadn't said a word, Xiaoyu had still noticed her. Yeah, I haven't seen you for 100 years, but you still don't lack female companions. Sister Xiaoyu. Xuelon pouted, but Xiaoyu pulled her back. Xuelon, you need to know that you're now the head of the leisure house and the leader of the Upheaval Alliance. After your brother left, he asked me to teach you well. Don't always act like a child, okay? But she's Zichengij. So what? Xiaoyu's tone was a little cold. Fortunately, Great Emperor Qingming walked out of the house at this time. The twins were just half a meter behind him. Emperor Yi. Great Emperor Qingming cupped his hands in greeting. Great Emperor Qingming. After Fuxi left, the Flame Emperor stepped down, and the immortal region is under your control. I've long since left the immortal region, so I don't really care. However, shouldn't you give the Flame Emperor and Lotus Emperor an explanation? Forcibly occupying private property and treating human lives like grass? The immortal region has never tolerated such problems. Fong, the Flame Emperor and Lotus Emperor trusted you, which is why they gave you their positions. That really is my problem, said Great Emperor Qingming. All right, it's a good thing no one really got hurt. We'll let this matter rest. Just be more careful in the future. The Lotus Emperor smiled kindly, then tapped the twins' foreheads. I'll seal your spiritual seas for 100 years. Go farm in the immortal region for 100 years. Yes, sir. The twins didn't dare disobey. Besides, with their spiritual seas sealed, they were no different from ordinary people. They could only nod in agreement. They'd reaped what they'd sown. At that moment, Bai suddenly took 2 steps forward, knelt, and kowtowed to Yi Zichen. Little Yu, the old village chief's soft call, didn't get a response from Bai Yu. After the youth kowtowed, he suddenly raised his head and pointed at the immortals in the village. Your Excellency, it doesn't matter if they stole our houses, or if they— Suddenly, the hearts of all the immortals in the village trembled. Great Emperor Qingming's brows darkened. Instantly, quite a few people in the sky shouted, "Please forgive us, Your Majesty. Please forgive us, Your Majesty. We will move out of the house right away and compensate the owner of the house. Please forgive us. We didn't do anything to the residents." Humph. Great Emperor Qingming snorted coldly, but at least he approved of their solution. The immortals in the sky instantly dispersed. Yi Zichen helped the youth up from the ground with a smile, then walked up to the village chief. "Uncle, I've startled you. Your Excellency, you're too serious." The village chief was terrified. He'd never seen any major figures in his life. In his eyes, sky immortals were supreme existences. Yet Yi Zichen had rebuked the ruler of the immortal region, Great Emperor Qingming. His status was obvious. Quite a few of the immortals who'd arrived relatively early and hadn't stolen anyone's house knit their brows. Suddenly, one of them glared at the newcomer and called the others to his side. "He's Emperor Yi." "Emperor Yi? Who's Emperor Yi?" Quite a few people didn't know Emperor Yi's identity, but when they saw the newcomer's astonished expression, their brows furrowed. "You mean the Emperor Yi who resisted the demon's invasion and then disappeared without a trace? Didn't they say he'd passed away?" The person who'd thought of this first frowned deeply. "Look at his appearance. He's 90% similar to the statue in Pawn City. Great Emperor Qingming, the Flame Emperor, and the Azure Emperor all look up to him. I'm afraid he's that Emperor Yi from before. Passed away? I'm afraid Emperor Yi has already become a god." "A god?" Quite a few people gasped. Most of them were human immortals. Sky immortals were few and far between. In their eyes, immortal kings were unattainable. But this Emperor Yi was a god? Can he come back after becoming a god? Who knows? In any case, we'd better behave for now. Don't provoke Emperor Yi and the others. Chapter 16-17. Golden light illuminated the world. 8 people in mourning attire, their faces obscured, knelt devoutly in the air like the white impermanences of hell. At their center stood another person, a basket full of golden paper in his arms. Countless sheets of golden paper fell from the sky. When they touched the ground, they melted into the earth and disappeared. No one knew who they were or why they'd come here. However, the immortals who'd come here were absolutely certain that the tomb contained a fortune that would make their hearts tremble. Unbeknownst to them, in the distant primordial god realm, a purple-robed man with golden hair and skin as white as paper held a bronze mirror in front of him. Shockingly, the image in the mirror was that of the god emperor's tomb. He calmly looked at the tomb in the mirror, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. "The Transcendence Tomb. It's about to arrive." As he spoke, the purple-robed man retracted his gaze and looked at the handsome youth standing beside him. "I heard you summoned back the Aeon Breaker beasts and are preparing to attack the Third Era ahead of schedule. Is there a problem?" asked the handsome youth coolly. "Of course there's no problem. However, you should know that if you attack the Third Era ahead of schedule, the people who control the laws might not stand on our side," said the purple-robed man. "That would be for the best." The handsome youth's azure eyes flashed with a thirst for battle. His lips slowly curved upwards. "I've long since found those masters of the laws to be an eyesore. They're pitifully weak, yet they insist on ruling over the myriad races. I want to use my actions to tell them that the god race is our supreme existence." "Yale, you really do deserve to be called the Destroyer." The purple-robed man shook his head. "Humph, don't think I can't tell what you're trying to say. Aren't you just calling me barbaric?" The handsome youth was none other than the god race's god king of destruction, Yale. He looked coldly at the purple-robed man beside him, then snorted with a fake smile. This handsome youth was none other than the god race's god king of destruction, Yale. He coldly looked at the purple-robed man beside him and snorted. "I'm rather surprised that you would come here." The handsome youth in front of him was none other than the god race's god king of destruction, Yale. Not long ago, I learned what true freedom is. What? 10,000 races submit to me. That is true freedom. Suddenly, a look flashed across the purple-robed man's face. Even God King of Destruction, Yale, felt a chill run down his spine. After staring at him for a long time, Yale nodded and smiled. I seem to have sensed something I shouldn't have. So what? As soon as he finished speaking, the purple-robed man returned to normal and looked down. Looks like that ant is where the hope of this era lies. Yale, just do as you say. The war god and I will stand on your side, said Yi Zichen with a smile. Yale's hand instantly trembled. If the purple-robed man had only been vaguely expressing his intentions earlier, then he had now openly expressed his intentions. He was the Freedom God King. The true freedom he wanted was to be above all other races. As long as there was a God King above him, he wouldn't be able to achieve true freedom. No wonder Yale found it strange before. Why would he be interested in coming here to see the Transcendence Tomb? The war god was already on his side, which meant that more than half of the god realm's fighting forces were under his command. His main purpose in coming here was probably to express his stance on this matter. Yale understood that the Freedom God King was trying to pull him into his group. Was he going to be his subordinate? Yale chuckled, then stopped thinking about it. He didn't care who he worked with. So long as he could enjoy the joy of destruction, that was enough. I am willing to work with you. That's perfect. The Freedom God King smiled and nodded. The instant Yale agreed, he seemed to lose all interest in the Transcendence Tomb. Let's go. Yale nodded. He'd come here purely to take a look. He also wanted to see just what kind of person the third era's Emperor Star was. He'd seen everything he wanted to see. There was naturally no reason to linger. He waved his hand and shattered the bronze mirror. The instant before it shattered, he glared at Yi Zichen. Is it you who the war goddess is so concerned about? Don't disappoint me, adorable Emperor Star. Yi Zichen suddenly knit his brows and looked up. Yang Jian and the others looked up as well. Pu Jingwan retracted her gaze and asked, What's going on? Nothing. Nothing. Just now, Yi Zichen had clearly sensed that someone was spying on him, but when he spread out his divine awareness, he didn't sense anyone at all. Yi Zichen indicated that they didn't need to worry, then focused his gaze on the tomb. What used to be the Howling Valley was now completely occupied by the tomb. It looked like it was on the ground, but in truth, it was still about half a meter above the ground. The tomb was like a mountain, and its base was vast. It was likely millions of kilometers wide. From the center of the mountain, it was clear that it wasn't actually a mountain, but rather a tomb. The clouds above the immortal region had turned golden red, and time seemed to freeze in eternal daylight. Yi Zichen and the others learned from the village chief that it had been half a month since they'd last seen night in the immortal region. When they heard this, they were undoubtedly shocked beyond belief. After a brief understanding of the situation, Yi Zichen and the others hurried over to the tomb to observe. When they arrived, there were quite a few immortals observing. As for the people in mourning attire, they acted as if they hadn't noticed them at all. They simply tossed golden paper down. This tomb is actually blue. As they got closer, Yang Jian couldn't help but exclaim. Before coming here, they'd assumed the tomb was red. Only now did they realize that the reason it was red was because there was a red barrier in front of the tomb. The barrier enveloped the entire mountain, which was why they'd assumed it was red. Through the barrier, they could see that the inside of the mountain was a sky blue. The tomb's main entrance was in the center of the mountain, and a plaque hung above it. The words were, Transcendence. Through the red barrier, Yi Zichen saw that there was a gap beneath the plaque. If there were no surprises, this gap should be the location where the key fragment of the God Emperor's tomb would be fused, and the entire tomb would be opened. Does this mean that this tomb can help people transcend? Muttered Pu Jingwan as she looked at the plaque. The others furrowed their brows as well. Although Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others had high cultivations, they were still of the younger generation. If it weren't for Yi Zichen, they wouldn't even have known about the God Emperor's tomb. Chapter 16:18. As soon as he said that, the Venerable crossed his arms and looked at Yi Zichen and the others as if they were begging him. Strangely, this time, none of Yi Zichen's group was bursting with curiosity. They didn't show the slightest interest in knowing why the God Emperor's tomb had the word transcendence. The venerable lord of numinous treasure could not help but ask for a snub, but he still continued to talk about the origin of the word transcendence. Before the end of any era, a transcendence tomb will appear. It's an unchanging, eternal law. Before the second era transcended, the remains of the God Emperor chosen by the Emperor Star were buried in this mausoleum. After that, the four great auxiliary stars sealed the mausoleum, which was why it was called the Mausoleum of the God Emperor in the Third Era. Don't underestimate this tomb. There really is an opportunity for transcendence hidden here. The Venerable of Lingbao shook his head and chuckled as if he was showing off his knowledge. The others did not respond, but the Venerable of Lingbao's explanation of the word transcendence was deeply imprinted in their minds. The Transcendence Tomb. The tomb actually contained the Second Era's Master of the Stars. Yi Zichen's heart trembled. If this really was the tomb of the Second Era's Master of the Stars, then even Emperor-level experts couldn't ignore the good fortune within. Just now, the Venerable had clearly mentioned that there was an opportunity for transcendence here. But if this was a tomb with an opportunity for transcendence, why hadn't it fallen into the hands of the gods, Yao, and demons? Why had it fallen into a lower plane where even their peak experts were only immortal kings? I never would have guessed you'd arrive even faster than me. Suddenly, hearty laughter filled the air above the tomb. This familiar voice caused Yi Zichen and the others to frown. They looked up and saw, to their astonishment, Gu Li and the others. However, Gu Li didn't see the left and right envoys with him. The only ones who'd come with him were Enlu and the two Imperial Emperors Gu Li had arranged to look after her. Although Gu Li had taken the initiative to befriend them recently, the conflict between them had long since escalated. Almost instinctively, Yang Jian and the others sealed off their auras and protected Yi Zichen in the middle. Enemies? Xuelon couldn't help but knit her brows. Should I call the Alliance's people over? No. Yi Zichen called out to stop her. He knew Xuelon had the strength to back him up. Not long ago, Xueqi and Stone ascended, and Xuelon became the new leader of the Upheaval Alliance. With his status as the Alliance leader, it was naturally not difficult for him to summon some Celestial King-level helpers. However, compared to Gu Li and the others, or more accurately, compared to people at their level, Immortal Kings were far too low. Hey, it's not that bad. By now, Gu Li and the others had also landed on the ground. Laughing heartily, Gu Li's expression was somewhat helpless. He shrugged and tried to approach. Stand there and don't move. At that moment, the great sage stabbed forward with his Rui Jingu Bang. If Gu Li dared take a single step forward, the great sage's Rui Jingu Bang would swing down without hesitation. And Lu bit her lips and stood in the middle, looking back and forth between Gu Li and Yi Zichen. Gu Li's smile remained as helpless as ever. He shrugged, took 2 steps back, then looked at Enlu with a smile. Don't worry, I'll be fine. You can go over. Nodding slightly, Enlu ran over with a smile on her face. As Enlu approached, Yang Jian and the others made no attempt to stop her. They allowed her to reach Yi Zichen's side. Big brother Zichen, said Enlu sweetly. Why'd you come with me? He patted Enlu on the head, then looked up. His smile faded, and he looked at Gu Li. What were you thinking? Why'd you bring Enlu here? It's not Gu Li's fault. I insisted on coming. I'm starting to miss you, big brother Zichen. Enlu laughed foolishly. When he saw her pure smile, Yi Zichen's iron heart melted instantly. He looked warmly at Enlu, his eyes filled with love and affection for his little sister. Then he looked back at Gu Li, but didn't dwell on Enlu's arrival. How rare. The Demon Emperor and the others aren't with you. Aren't you the same? The Ocean Emperor and the others didn't come with you either, said Gu Li. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Yi Zichen got straight to the point. You brought the fragments, right? Naturally, Gu Li unhesitatingly opened his palm, revealing 2 key fragments to the God Emperor's tomb. These are all I've got. Given your relationship with the Jade Lake Palace Master, you should have great Immortal Tai Bai's key fragment as well. As for the one in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Yi Zichen didn't waste any time. With a flip of his hand, he took out a key fragment as well. He had 3 key fragments. One was from Tai Bai Jinxing's red packet, the second was from Fairy Zixa's family heirloom, and the last was from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. 5 key fragments appeared in the same place. They seemed to resonate with each other, and each trembled violently in Yi Zichen's and Gu Li's hands. You really don't disappoint. In just half a month, you really did become a ruler, laughed Gu Li. Don't say such useless things. You have Gu Li from the outside by your side. I'm sure you know how to fuse the fragments into a single key. Naturally, laughed Gu Li. I naturally know how to fuse the fragments, and I also know how to open the tomb. That for the best. The fortune inside depends on our own abilities. Whoever gets it first gets it. However, there's one thing I absolutely must have, said Yi Zichen. Soul grass? I know, laughed Gu Li calmly. Gu Li smiled calmly. If it's just the 2 of us going in, I can naturally give it to you. However, once the tomb opens, it won't be as simple as you think. Oh, right, before we open it, I have to warn you. I recommend that you chase away all these small fries. It's best if you leave as soon as possible. Who are you calling small fries? Frowned Lil. I'm talking about you. Gu Li naturally didn't show any fear in the face of Lil Yu's questions. The difference between them was as vast as the distance between heaven and earth. In his eyes, an immortal king like Lil Yu could be obliterated with a single breath. Gu Li merely glanced at Lil Yu. She'd been furious just a moment ago, but now it was as if she'd been frozen solid. Her entire body trembled, her face as white as a sheet, and she knelt to the ground. Gu Li, Yi Zichen called out to Gu Li, then hurriedly sealed off the space around Lil Yu, then tapped her forehead a few times. Chapter 16:19. As soon as Gu Li finished speaking, the immortals surrounding the God Emperor's tomb couldn't help but leave the vicinity of the tomb. However, from their expressions, it was clear that this wasn't their own will. They'd been driven out. That's much more comfortable. After driving the immortals away, a hint of a smile flashed through Gu Li's eyes. By now, only Gu Li and Yi Zichen remained within a few hundred meters of the tomb. Everyone knew that the God Emperor's tomb contained heaven-defying good fortune, yet they'd been driven out of the realm for no apparent reason. How could the immortals just let go? After being driven out, quite a few immortals gathered around the God Emperor's tomb. However, Gu Li had long since set up seals around the tomb. Never mind sky immortals and immortal kings. Not even the rulers of the god, Yao, and demon realms could break through. The immortals activated countless magical artifacts in an attempt to shatter the barrier. However, their actions were like ants trying to shake a tree. It was as if they were dreaming. Emperor Yi, at that moment, an expert among the immortals, stepped forward and bowed respectfully to Yi Zichen from several hundred meters away. What is the meaning of this? Those who recognized Yi Zichen were naturally people who'd lived in the lower 3 realms for many years. At the very least, they weren't of the new generation born after the ley lines appeared. Gu Li had driven them out of the realm, so they couldn't return. All they could do was question Yi Zichen. Although Yi Zichen was Emperor Yi, in the face of good fortune, they couldn't care less. Good fortune has always been revealed to the fated. Since this tomb is in the immortal region, and we're lucky enough to be here, it means we're connected to it by fate. You forcefully drove us away. But have you ever thought about how we, the immortals of the immortal region, who revered you, would be bitterly disappointed? With sharp tongue. Without waiting for Yi Zichen's response, Gu Li stepped through the air and landed in front of the man who'd spoken up. When they saw this, Yi Zichen and the others hurried after him, afraid that Gu Li would kill the immortal region expert in a fit of rage. With his cultivation level, it would probably be effortless for him to kill a celestial king stage expert. Gu Li, Yi Zichen shouted. Gu Li tilted his head, glanced at him, and snorted. Don't worry, I know they were once under your jurisdiction. I won't take their lives, but you have to make them recognize the situation before them. You don't need to say anything, just leave it to me. You are too soft-hearted. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Li turned around. The coldness in his eyes made the other immortals feel like they had fallen into an ice cave. Even the immortal king who stood out earlier was stunned speechless. His gaze was complicated. He didn't want to give up on this opportunity, but he was afraid of the person in front of him. What do you want? Don't tell me you want to kill me here. Kill you? Guli laughed coldly. Do you think I wouldn't dare? The barrier that immortals couldn't cross had no effect on Guli. He stretched out his arm and gripped the neck of the immortal king tightly, his eyes filled with arrogance and disdain. The face of the immortal king, whose neck was grabbed, turned red. He couldn't breathe, and his tongue kept sticking out. However, before long, Guli pushed him away again. The immortal king instantly knelt in midair, clutched his neck, and coughed uncontrollably. If I wanted to kill you, it would be as easy as slaughtering chickens. If it weren't for your Emperor Yi, do you really think you'd still be alive? Although Guli had yet to reveal his true strength, the immortals before him all stopped in their tracks. Their fear of Guli was obvious from their eyes. Guli said, "Driving you away is saving your lives. Do you think this tomb is good fortune for you?" Wrong. Its appearance here isn't good fortune at all. It's an undeserved calamity. Human immortals, sky immortals, and immortal kings? Do you really think this tomb is good fortune for you? Human immortals, sky immortals, and immortal kings? You want to lay a finger on the god Emperor's tomb? How laughable. Venerable, what Guli said. Yi Zichen glanced at the venerable of numinous treasure. The venerable nodded. He's telling the truth. The tomb's appearance here is an undeserved calamity for these little fellows. You don't even need to think about it. Which one of us can't destroy this lower plane on our own? Yi Zichen and the others couldn't agree more. Meanwhile, Guli was still talking to the immortals. You should thank your Emperor Yi. If it weren't for him, given my previous temperament, you would have long since gone to the underworld. You wouldn't even have the chance to boss me around here. Forget it. I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. You just can't accept me driving you away, right? Then I'll tell you right now that I'm driving you away because I'm stronger than all of you. Boom! Guli's aura instantly surged forth like that of a ferocious beast. The void of the lower plane couldn't withstand his might and shattered like a mirror. Before releasing his aura, Guli did his best to avoid harming the immortal kings. Even so, the immortals were in unspeakable pain. Some coughed up blood, others fell from the sky, and others knelt on the ground, unable to get up. Only a few peak immortal kings managed to stabilize themselves, but even so, they were in terrible shape. His ruler's aura was fleeting. After showing the immortals a bit of his strength, Guli retracted his aura. His gaze was still as cold as ever. He didn't even glance at the immortals as he spoke to Yi Zichen. Have your people take them away. If you don't want this place to be plunged into misery and suffering, you'd best tell them that there's no need to keep anyone in the immortal region. Yi Zichen gazed deeply at Guli, then ordered Great Emperor Qingming, Xuelon, and the others to take care of this matter. Once they received their orders and left, Guli reached out his hand. Yi Zichen didn't need to think too much to know that he wanted the key fragment to the God Emperor's tomb. However, just as he was about to hand it to Guli, his hand froze in midair. Will more people come when the tomb opens? Why are you suddenly asking this? Laughed Guli. If it were just us, there would be no need to do this. Since you said you don't want this place to be plunged into misery and suffering, then... Chapter 16:20. The vast Milky Way. In this dazzling place, the Emperor Star's light was as dazzling as an emperor's. The auxiliary stars around it bowed their heads in worship, and the Nirvana star shone brightly against the Emperor Star's light. However, among the millions of stars, there was one that seemed to want to break free of its fate. It continuously released its light, almost eclipsing the light of the surrounding stars. Even so, its light couldn't shake the Emperor Star in the slightest. Ugh! In the garden, Zhou Wu, clad in purple robes, coughed up a mouthful of blood. He sat cross-legged on the ground, as if he'd gone mad. His messy hair danced along with his divine power. His black hair had also turned snow white at this moment. He pushed against the ground with both hands, blood still flowing from his mouth. His pitch-black eyes were filled with savagery. He clawed at the ground, scratching the granite he sat on. Why? Sitting on the ground, Zhou Wu roared at the sky. Just now, among the millions of stars, the one that had tried its best to release light and replace the Emperor's star was Zhou Wu. In the past few months, he'd secluded himself. He didn't care about anything in the outside world. He'd focused on finding a way to transcend. His efforts paid off. During his seclusion, he'd truly comprehended something. If he wanted to take that step, he needed to become the Emperor's star among the millions of stars. He'd originally been a person without a star. He'd only used some tricks to usurp the Emperor's star's celestial fate, which had belonged to the 5 elements. In order to take that final step, he'd used a trick to snatch the celestial fate belonging to the master of the stars he'd recruited. He'd used his starlight to replace the Emperor's star. The result had been barely satisfactory. Perhaps he had truly underestimated the existence of an Emperor's star. Even though Zhou Wu was giving it his all, even though his starlight had dimmed the stars around him, even though his radiance was so bright that even millions of stars couldn't ignore it, Zhou Wu had underestimated the existence of an Emperor's star. But in the face of the Emperor's star, he was still just the light of a firefly. No matter how much effort he put in, he couldn't compare to the Emperor's star's brilliance, which was supported by the 4 auxiliary stars. He couldn't accept this. He had the Emperor's celestial fate, which proved that he was fated to become the ruler of the world. Why couldn't he become the Emperor Celestial? In the era of the 5 elements Great Emperor and Zhou Wu, the two of them had been the most dazzling figures in the 3 realms. He was no less dazzling than the 5 elements Great Emperor. Why had the Emperor's star not chosen him, but the 5 elements Great Emperor? After he usurped the 5 elements Great Emperor's celestial fate, why hadn't the Emperor's star taken pity on him? To the other star lords, why? Zhou Wu, who was in the garden, was constantly venting his anger. In an instant, the dignified garden had been destroyed beyond recognition. The people of the God Emperor's mansion could feel the ground trembling. Their hearts trembled, and their necks shrank back. Actually, Zhou Wu's current cultivation level was enough for him to stand at the pinnacle of the 3 realms. Even if he didn't take the step of transcendence, there was no one in the 3 realms who could restrict his freedom. However, everyone was ambitious. Furthermore, Zhou Wu's ambition was much greater than others. Damn it. Gritting his teeth, Zhou Wu stood up for the ground. His eyes were filled with indifference as he looked at the devastation in the garden. Was he really not destined to transcend? Zhou Wu could not help but ask himself this in his heart. Suddenly, his brows furrowed. He gently lifted his leg and left the forest garden. When he reappeared, he was outside the garden's main gate. God Emperor. There were 3 people standing guard outside the garden. One was the Divine Arbiter, and the other 2 were the patriarchs of the 2 factions he'd carefully cultivated, Yuchi Kong and Huangfu Yuming. These 2 had previously been stationed on other divine mountains, but too many unforeseen events had occurred recently. For his own sake, Zhou Wu called the 2 patriarchs back to Heavenly God City. Their clans also returned to the central divine mountain. When the 3 of them saw the God Emperor, they bowed and greeted him. Although he was in a terrible state, none of them dared mention this matter. That furious roar just now and the tremors in the ground told them that the God Emperor had failed his secluded cultivation. No one dared to provoke him, so all they could do was wait for him to speak. The Transcendence Tomb has already fallen, said the God Emperor. It has, said Huangfu Yuming. However, it didn't fall on the God, Yao, or demon realms. Instead, it fell on the lower planes. If it did, then why didn't you tell me? Anger flashed through the God Emperor's eyes. I told them not to disturb you. The Divine Arbiter stepped forward and cupped her hands. Before you went into seclusion, you said that your seclusion was of great importance. I was afraid that they would distract you if they told you, so I didn't tell them. Instead, I waited here. If the God Emperor wishes to blame me, then just blame it on this subordinate. It's you. Zhou Wu looked at the Divine Arbiter with an indescribable expression for a long time. In the end, his angry expression relaxed, and he nodded, breathing heavily. I don't blame you, Divine Arbiter. You and I have been estranged lately, and your words are full of blame. No matter what you do, when have I ever blamed you? Forget it. Have the other divine mountains made any moves? The emperors of the divine mountains have all left the god realm, said Yuchikon. Humph. I didn't think they would be so greedy for transcendence. Zhou Wu snorted coolly. That's perfect. If I can obtain some good fortune from the transcendence tomb and break through to the transcendence realm, those who disobeyed me won't be able to escape. The key to the tomb should be in the Emperor Star's hands. Coincidentally, I'd like to meet the Emperor Star I've never met before. The Divine Arbiter and the others didn't speak. Zhou Wu cracked his neck. Is there any news from the shamans? Your subordinates don't know. The shamans have always transcended the three realms, said Yuchikon. I have no way of knowing what they're up to. After receiving this answer, Zhou Wu stared at him for a long time before he smiled and said, Forget it. We'll see them when we get to the tomb. I believe those old fellows of the shaman tribe will definitely not ignore the mausoleum. Little did they know at that very moment in a certain wasteland, it was like an ancient clan altar. Below the altar stood tens of thousands of clansmen dressed in animal skins. In the center of the altar, there were 12 seats. With a strange crackle, a bonfire blazed at the center of the altar. 12 men and women suddenly appeared atop the chairs. They were humanoid, but not real people. Their appearance caused the clansmen beneath the altar to kneel. Greetings, Grand Shaman. Chapter 16:21. Are we going to be born? The one who spoke was a ferocious beast with bone spikes all over his body. His eyes were bloodthirsty like a beast. He was Rain's sorcerer ancestor Xian Ming, ranked 11th among the 12 sorcerer ancestors. The sorcerer tribe had existed since the beginning of the era. They didn't know how they appeared in this world. Just like the first generation of the god, monster, and demon tribes at the beginning of the era. However, the people who were born at the beginning of the epoch all had modeled information in their minds. For example, the 12 ancestral sorcerers in front of them were born with supreme divine powers and knew what they were going to do in the future. The sorcerer tribe was beyond the three tribes and hadn't appeared for billions of years. Only a few sorcerer ancestors had traveled the world and left some legends as if announcing their existence to the world. However, their people lived in the sorcerer tribe's territory forever. The Transcendence Tomb had appeared. Everything was the same as the warning in their minds when they were born. It was time for them to come out. Hey, it's good to go out and have a look. This time it was a guy with 8 heads, a human face, a tiger's body, and 10 tails. He was Wind sorcerer ancestor Tianwu, ranked 6th among the 12 sorcerer ancestors. Forget it. If you come out, you'll be killed as a demon. The sorcerer ancestor of the north, Gong Gong, laughed. He had a python's head and a human's body. He was covered in black scales, stepping on a black dragon and coiling around a green python. You're not much better than me. Tianwu's 6th head said. Soon his 3rd head said, Boss Dijiang, who do you think will go out this time? The sorcerer ancestors on the platform all looked at the faceless guy who looked like a yellow sack and was as red as elixir fire. Green smoke slowly revolved around him, and not long after, a handsome youth walked out from under the green face. Hutu and Candle Joeen will go out this time. Hutu was the last of the 12 sorcerer ancestors. He had a human body and a snake's tail. He had 7 hands on his back and 2 hands on his chest. He was the sorcerer ancestor of Central Earth. Candle Joeen was ranked 9th. He had a human body and a snake's body. He was completely red. He was the sorcerer ancestor of time. Dijiang's nomination made the 2 rise from their chairs at the same time. Suddenly, the 2 grand ancestors of sorcery, who were half human and half demon, transformed into a burly man and a petite, cute little girl. Candle Dragon, aren't you being too twisted? The Easternwood ancestral magus, Gomong, who had a bird's body and a human's face, could not help but widen his eyes. The petite and cute little girl was Candle Joeen. When Hutu saw the little girl beside him, he was stunned, but he did not say anything. It's just for fun. Isn't that good? The lowly Candle Dragon smiled faintly and looked at Dijiang after cupping her hands at the other ancestral sorcerers. Are we going now? Take them with you before you go. Emperor Jiang waved his hand lightly. A young man with a longbow on his back and a graceful woman with lotuses on her feet slowly walked up from below the altar. When the two of them walked up the altar, they nodded at the ancestral sorcerers respectively before Dijiang spoke. They will go with you, but their purpose for this trip is different from yours. You don't need to take too much care of them. They're going as well. The little lowly candle dragon's eyes flashed with an obscure expression. She smiled and said, "It seems like this time's birth has become more and more interesting. If I remember correctly, the two of them seem to be a little unclear with that person. That's not something you and I need to worry about." Dijiang's expression did not change. Dijiang's expression didn't change. The purpose of your trip is to consider the current Emperor's star. You don't need to do anything else. Also, keep an eye on the situation over there for me. Over there? You're saying? Yes, that's them. Rumble. Purplish-red, lightning broke through the clouds. The sun in the sky was obscured by dark clouds. The entire immortal region and the endless beast region were enveloped in darkness. Under this terrifying darkness, the tomb of the God Emperor looked like a blood-red mountain. The light of the barrier seemed to want to disperse the darkness. It constantly released its power. Evil winds blew, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The 9 people hovering above the tomb wore mourning clothes. They landed in 9 different directions and knelt around the tomb. Ghoulie stood in front of the God Emperor's tomb, clutching a golden key half a meter long. It was formed from the fragments of the key. That was why the strange phenomena had appeared. Crackle. The barrier that separated the mountain flashed with halos, and white electric arcs rippled across the barrier like waves. Ghoulie quietly closed his eyes. He stood motionless in front of Yi Zichen for an hour. What's he doing? Yang Jian and the others couldn't help but mutter to themselves. The strange phenomena had appeared for far too long, but Ghoulie, who'd condensed the key, hadn't done anything yet. They couldn't help but feel suspicious and anxious. He's waiting for time. The supremacy of numinous treasure suddenly said, "You've all seen the barrier outside the Transcendence tomb. This barrier exists to protect the tomb. If we don't wait for the heavenly lightning to disperse it, even if we transcend here, we won't be able to break through it. That barrier is so fierce." The great sage paled in shock. The barrier looked fragile. He'd always assumed that so long as he struck it with his staff, it would shatter without a doubt. He hadn't done so because he was worried he'd break the barrier and lose control of his strength, destroying the mountain. Do you think this is a tomb that can help people transcend? If it could be so easily destroyed, how could it be worthy of its hidden fortune? Laughed the venerable of numinous treasure. In other words, even if they had the key, they couldn't directly open the door to the tomb. They could only wait for the barrier to disperse. Only then could they insert the key. Who knew how long they'd have to wait? Ghoulie had already said that quite a few people would come for the tomb. Even God Emperor Zhou Wu would be there. Yi Zichen didn't want to see that hateful face before entering. Furthermore, if Yi Zichen and the others didn't enter by the time he arrived, all their efforts to conceal the Emperor Star would be for naught. Everything would be for naught. Although their hearts burned with anxiety, they could only wait bitterly. Fortunately, the immortals of the nearby immortal regions had already evacuated, and Yi Zichen had sent the major powers of the Endless Beast region to communicate with them. If nothing unexpected happened, it wouldn't be long before the immortal region, which would soon become a battlefield, saw no immortals or Yao left. Rumble. Thunder continued to rumble through the sky. Everyone stared intently at the sky above the god's mausoleum. At that moment, Chapter 16:22. Before the golden red light spread out, the venerable of numinous treasure took the lead and set up a barrier around them. He couldn't afford to be too slow. He was the only one who understood the Transcendence Tomb. He knew exactly how blinding this light was. Even a ruler would be blinded by it. Even Yang Jian and the other sovereigns, who didn't understand the tomb, would find it difficult to react in time. He had no choice but to take action. The blinding light hurt everyone's eyes. When they recovered a little, they noticed that a barrier had been set up around them. They glanced at each other. There was no need to think too much to know that the venerable of numinous treasure had taken action. The entire sky of the immortal region was enveloped in a golden red light. Everyone felt as if they were standing in a golden red sea. As they stood within the barrier, they saw that the light was so blinding they couldn't look directly at it. Fortunately, the barrier blocked the golden red light, so everyone's vision was a little better. Did that light come from the barrier? Pu Jingwan pursed her lips and stared at the God Emperor's tomb. Only now did the others notice that the barrier separating them from the tomb had disappeared. All they could see was a blinding light radiating from every direction. The source of the light was none other than the barrier. "That bolt of heavenly lightning just now destroyed it," said Yang Jian, thinking back to the lightning. In truth, even before that bolt of heavenly lightning had descended, the sky had been filled with terrifying lightning and thunder. When the lightning struck just now, they hadn't sensed anything special about it. They hadn't expected it to release such dazzling light when it came into contact with the barrier. Even at Yang Jian's, Pu Jingwan's, and the great sage's realms, when the light fell into their eyes, they were blinded for a long time. Even now, the stabbing pain still lingered. But why is that guy completely fine? The great sage frowned at Gu Li. Having personally experienced that dazzling light, Yang Jian and the others knew just how powerful it was. Gu Li had been standing closest to the barrier, so his cultivation was even lower than theirs. In terms of vision, he couldn't compare to the great sage's fiery eyes of truth, which he'd refined using old Lord Taishang's pill furnace. They were on par. However, Gu Li didn't show even the slightest hint of discomfort as he faced the blinding light. His eyes were open as usual, and he made no effort to avoid the light. Everyone was puzzled. They only dared to look at the divine mountain because of the existence of the barrier. Don't forget what he has in his hand. Hearing the great sage and company's discussion, the venerable of numinous treasure could not help but say, "He has the key to open the tomb," which also means that he is the owner of the tomb. Furthermore, this barrier was a barrier set up by the 4 auxiliary stars. They were the assistants. How could someone from the Imperial Star harm the Imperial Star? Look at Yi Zichen. Does he look like he's in pain at all? I really don't feel any discomfort, Yi Zichen said truthfully. Yang Jian and the great sage glanced at each other, speechless. The light they'd released just now had nearly blinded them. But when it came to Yi Zichen and Gu Li, 2 emperors chosen by the heavens, it posed no threat at all. Actually, this barrier exists because the 4 auxiliary stars want to help the new Emperor Star get rid of some competitors. However, this time, the location of the Transcendence Mausoleum is rather special, so none of the major powers who might have had a chance to compete have appeared. As a result, the barrier's light is completely useless, explained the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure explained, "Get rid of competitors." At Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, and the others' cultivation, they could use their divine awareness to survey their surroundings even without using their eyes. Even so, they were used to seeing the world with their eyes. If it were not for the Venerable of Ling Bao's timely intervention when the membrane suddenly released the light just now, it was unknown whether Yang Jian and the others would have been blinded. However, judging from the burning and tingling sensation just now, it was very likely that they would have been blinded. They could already be considered the peak experts of the 3 races. If even they were like that, the experts of the other races would be the same. Losing their eyes didn't mean that they'd lost their ability to fight, but they were absolutely used to seeing the world with their eyes. This was no small help to the Emperor Star. Unfortunately, the mausoleum had landed on a lower plane, so none of the major powers had come. If they'd come, they really might have been caught off guard by the sudden burst of light. For a moment, Yi Zichen felt it was a pity. It would have been better if Zhou Wu had blinded him. "Wait," Venerable of Numinous Treasure said, "that Gu Li has the key to the God Emperor's mausoleum, so he'll be recognized as its master?" Yang Jian frowned at the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. "That's what you said, right?" The Venerable of Numinous Treasure nodded non-committally. F*CK. I told you this bro was up to no good. He tricked my brother into opening the mausoleum with his key fragment and made the mausoleum recognize him as its master. Once he enters the mausoleum, The mausoleum will definitely treat him better, right? Yang Jian's rare wit lit up. You're right, nodded the venerable of numinous treasure. That bastard, Yang Jian cursed. He wanted nothing more than to strangle Gu Li to death. Little did he know, he'd forgotten that Enlu was inside the barrier as well. She was absolutely passionate about Gu Li. When she heard Yang Jian slander Gu Li behind his back, her face filled with hidden bitterness. However, when she remembered that he was Yi Zichen's friend, she couldn't really say anything. Fortunately, Yi Zichen noticed all of this. He turned to Yang Jian and shouted. Yang Jian wanted to say something else, but when he noticed Enlu's expression, he hurriedly swallowed his words and refrained from slandering Gu Li. Big brother Yi, Gu Li absolutely doesn't have any ulterior motives, said Enlu on Gu Li's behalf. It doesn't matter if he does or doesn't. If whoever opens the mausoleum is the successor, I might be angry at Gu Li for hiding it from me. Once the mausoleum opens, anyone can enter. Even if he's recognized as the successor, the mausoleum will treat him well. In truth, it's no big deal. Yi Zichen patted Enlu on the head and smiled. Don't frown all the time. You don't look good. Enlu's goal in coming here was to ease the tension between Yi Zichen and Gu Li. She didn't want the man she liked and the man she liked to always be at loggerheads with each other. When she saw that Yi Zichen wasn't angry, Enlu pressed her lips into a smile and nodded. Why hasn't he opened it yet? Asked Pu Jingwan. It's already been more than an hour. The light hadn't weakened in the slightest. The God Emperor's mausoleum, which occupied the entire Howling Gorge, shone so brightly that the heavenly palace and the underworld could see it clearly. It had indeed been more than an hour since the barrier shattered, but Gu Li still hadn't placed the key into the lock. Inside the hole. Chapter 1623. The barrier outside the tomb was destroyed by the heavenly lightning. What is he waiting for? Muttered Yang Jian, glaring at Gu Li, who still hadn't inserted the key into the keyhole. In truth, Yang Jian had considered the possibility that there was a barrier around the tomb that they couldn't see. That was why he'd opened his third eye long ago. The great sage didn't just stand there. His fiery eyes scanned the tomb, but he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The barrier outside the tomb had been destroyed. There was no more barrier around it. Gu Li still held the key without moving. They couldn't help but pay attention to him. Don't you think this guy knows a bit too much? Pu Jingwan looked at the motionless Gu Li. A long time ago, he knew about the tomb's collapse and the location of the final key fragment. He also knew that many experts would rush to the tomb. Even if he's one of heaven's 2 chosen emperors, he knows a bit too much. He knows a bit too much. That was the truth. Gu Li really did know a lot of information no one else knew. The others didn't know why, but Yi Zichen knew. He knew most likely because of Gu Li, the outsider, who stood behind him. He'd lived in the first era and experienced everything Yi Zichen and the others were about to experience. Right now, he was simply telling Gu Li everything he'd experienced. When he thought of Gu Li, Yi Zichen couldn't help but recall what the outsider experts had told him. The first era had been destroyed. Even the current Yi Zichen didn't dare imagine just how strong the outsider's Gu Li was. How could the first era, protected by someone like that, be destroyed just like that? This was simply too shocking. Yi Zichen couldn't help but glance over at Gu Li. Inexplicably, he recalled that even he'd forgotten who'd told him that Gu Li wasn't as despicable as he'd thought, and that he should deal with someone else in the future. At the time, Yi Zichen hadn't taken Gu Li's advice to heart. He didn't think he'd ever get along with Gu Li. But what was the result now? He was living harmoniously with Gu Li, and he'd even placed the precious key to the God Emperor's tomb in his hands. As for who that person was it the white-robed Gu Zichen, or was it the assistant star Han they'd met in the outside? Suddenly, Yi Zichen's gaze froze. He didn't know why, but he couldn't remember the auxiliary star's name. No matter how hard he racked his brains, he couldn't even remember his identity. After that, he couldn't even remember where he'd come from. Who is that person? Yi Zichen couldn't help but question himself. No matter how he thought about it, it was as if all information about the outside's Han Nan had been erased from his consciousness. Erased. The venerable lord of Lingbao saw everything. He smiled bitterly and murmured to himself, Yi Zichen had no memory of Han Nan from the outside. This meant that the first era had truly been destroyed, and Han Nan no longer existed in this world. It was as if the destroyed first era had never existed. Since it didn't exist, how could there be any memories? Look, Guli is moving. Even Yi Zichen, who'd been racking his brains to remember Han Nan, was drawn to the commotion. He looked in Guli's direction and saw that Guli had indeed moved. He gently placed the key into the keyhole, then turned it gently to the left. Everyone heard a soft, crisp click from the tomb's keyhole. However, the door to the tomb didn't open. Guli took a few steps back, then stood in a slightly dark corner, leaving the tomb's main entrance open. Space is trembling. Yang Jian's sharp senses detected the ripples in the void. When everyone looked up, they saw 4 pitch-black vortexes appearing in the sky above the tomb. Dai Shaoran knelt in the 9 corners of the tomb, his eyes flashing with reverence. He looked up at the vortexes. After a long while, the vortexes suddenly lit up. The light grew increasingly dazzling, so much so that it almost eclipsed the blinding red light outside the barrier. There were 4 stars. Within the 4 pitch-black vortexes were 4 stars of different brilliance. Pu Jingwan suddenly pointed at the sky, and at that moment, Pu Jingwan suddenly pointed at the sky. Look, the Milky Way has appeared, but the 4 auxiliary stars beside the Emperor's star have disappeared. She looked up. The immortal region, which used to be so dark that night, was suddenly filled with dazzling stars. The North Star was so dazzling that it was impossible to ignore it. However, its dazzling radiance gave off the impression that it was alone. When they looked closely, they saw that it was the 4 auxiliary stars that had disappeared. Could it be? Yang Jian's Adam's apple bobbed as he looked at the 4 stars below the vortex. The auxiliary stars above the Milky Way had disappeared, but 4 stars had suddenly appeared here. Did that mean that these 4 stars were actually the 4 auxiliary stars? The stars could actually move, and they even appeared right in front of them. In the modern realm, when lovers confessed their love, men would always say, "Even if you wanted the moon, I'd pluck it for you." Everyone knew that was just words of love. Who could pluck the moon from the sky? Forget about ordinary people with no spiritual power in the modern realm. Plucking the stars and grabbing the moon was an unattainable feat, even for rulers like Yi Zichen. It was an unimaginable feat, but now, it really did seem as if the Nirvana stars had gotten out of their hands. The 4 auxiliary stars had appeared out of nowhere. Everyone within the barrier couldn't help but be shocked. Did their appearance also prove that the tomb's opening required them? The 4 great auxiliary stars? Starlight scattered from the auxiliary stars. As the Emperor's star, Yi Zichen knew that this was starlight. The Emperor's star starlight was pure gold. The 4 auxiliary stars' starlight was an elite bright silver. The faded stars was a grayish silver. As for the multitude stars' starlight, it was the most ordinary silver white. Bright silver starlight fell from these 4 stars, but this starlight did not completely fall to the ground. Instead, it condensed in midair, forming 4 figures. Even though Yi Zichen had already opened his celestial eyes, he still couldn't see clearly who these 4 people were. However, at that moment, the 4 people formed from starlight suddenly placed their right hands on their chests and knelt on one knee in the air. Their heads were all facing the same direction. What was even more shocking was that, at some point, the Howling Gorge had been filled with starlight. Countless people made of starlight appeared in the gorge. It was as if they were ministers in ancient times meeting their king. They all knelt in front of the 4 auxiliary stars. Chapter 16:24. Within the barrier, Yang Jian and the others were stunned. When they sensed the direction the newcomers were heading in, they instinctively moved aside and made way for Yi Zichen, who stood in their midst. The stars kowtowed to the Emperor's star. Guli stood in the darkness, his eyes filled with envy and bitterness. He was one of heaven's 2 chosen emperors. That much was true. However, from the looks of it, he hadn't touched even the slightest bit of the Emperor's star's fortune. Now that the stars were kowtowing to Yi Zichen, it was a good comparison. He'd been the one to open the God Emperor's tomb, and he'd summoned the stars. However, the person they'd kowtowed to wasn't him, but Yi Zichen. Disappointment was inevitable. After being chosen as one of heaven's 2 chosen emperors, Gu Li couldn't help but feel like he was the sole ruler of heaven and earth. However, he wasn't the one to assist the 4 auxiliary stars, and the fated stars never appear by his side. It was as if he were invisible, and the Nirvana stars had never shown him any favor. Ever since then, he'd begun to suspect that he wouldn't be the one to truly receive the Emperor Star's fortune. Old man, it's not that I don't want to fight, it's that we're not fated to do so. Gu Li smiled bitterly. Outside, Gu Li had always wanted him to fight for the fortune of heaven and earth, to fight for that one position. Unfortunately, the myriad stars had already made their choice. What were they doing? Yi Zichen was astonished when he saw the myriad stars kowtow to him. He inexplicably felt a chill run down his spine. No wonder there'd always been strange activity in the Howling Gorge. Judging from the myriad stars' appearance, the auxiliary stars, the fated stars, and the myriad stars had all been buried here when the master of the second era transformed into a star. Somewhere. No wonder the tomb had ended up here. It was all part of the myriad stars' plan. In other words, they were standing on a myriad stars' graves? The kowtowing lasted no more than 100 breaths of time. Then, the myriad stars slowly vanished, followed by the women standing in front of them. Finally, the 4 auxiliary stars. The starlight dissipated, and the 4 auxiliary stars also disappeared. However, the 4 auxiliary stars did not leave just like that. Instead, they flickered with light as they flew to the tomb's main entrance, landing in the 4 stone statues at the entrance. The mountain-like tomb of the god Emperor rumbled, and countless rocks and dust fell from the top of the mountain. The smoke became even more hazy under the illumination of the gradually dimming golden-red radiance. At this moment, the main entrance of the tomb slowly opened. Even though it was a little dazzling outside, the light could not shine into the tomb at all. It was impossible to see what was inside the tomb with the naked eye. If you don't want Zhou Wu to see you here and expose your identity as the Emperor Star, then stay in the barrier. By now, Gu Li had already appeared at the tomb's main entrance. Lu and the 2 monarch-level attendants stood by his side. They entered the tomb without even looking back. Only then did Yi Zichen return to his senses and leave the barrier. Yang Jian and company naturally followed closely behind him and stepped into the tomb. The door of the tomb did not close. It was still wide open. Not long after they entered, countless vortexes suddenly appeared in the sky. Judging from their auras, any one of them was strong enough to destroy the entire lower plane with the wave of a hand. When they sensed that someone of similar cultivation had appeared, they couldn't help but exchange glances. When they saw each other's faces clearly, some of them were astonished. Perhaps they were astonished at why this person had come. Indeed, the tomb's appearance had brought quite a few reclusive old fellows into view. Quite a few of them smiled or looked at each other with disgust. However, they didn't interact much. After exchanging glances, they looked back at the tomb. When they saw that the door was already open, they didn't hesitate at all. They dashed through it. The God Emperor's tomb seemed to contain the entire world. Its doors were open to all visitors. Several more tremors appeared in the void. This time, the people who stepped out were clearly of a much higher cultivation level than the people who had come before. Ocean Emperor, Hermit Emperor, Empress of the Fox Clan, Shinji, why are you here too? The newcomers were none other than Yi Zichen and the other great emperors of the Great Alliance. It was as if they'd agreed on this beforehand. They'd appeared one after the other, but only they knew better than anyone else that they'd never communicated with each other before this. The group chat didn't contain any information about them contacting each other. It was all just a coincidence. Shuiyang, you bastard! Didn't you say you weren't coming? Great Emperor Bian pointed at Shuiyang and cursed. Although they hadn't contacted each other before this, they'd talked about the God Emperor's tomb 100 years ago. Didn't you say you weren't interested in the tomb too? Roared Shuiyang, rolling his eyes. Big Sister Qingyan, why are you here too? As the great emperors argued, Xianji walked up to Su Qingyan and the head of the Fox clan. Su Wana, if both of you come, what will happen to the Fox clan? Su Yan and Su Lu are enough to support the entire clan, said Su Qingyan with a smile. Su Yin had fused with the god of life's godhead and become the god of life. Su Lu Er's breath of eyes had improved tremendously, and she was now on par with Xianji. With the two of them overseeing the Fox clan, they were as reassuring as the Fox ancestor had been. In the past, the Fox clan had always relied on her, and Su wanted her to support it. Now that they'd finally found two people capable of taking their place, the two sisters were relieved. "I almost forgot about them," said Xianji with a nod. "Why are you here too? The way I see it, you shouldn't have any interest in this." The Jade Lake Palace Master suddenly walked up to them. The great emperors had already split into two factions, the men's faction and the women's faction. The Jade Lake Palace Master naturally came to Xianji and the others. "Of course I'm not interested. I'm here because someone told me to come," said Xianji. "You ran into that person too?" The Jade Lake Palace Master arched her brows. Little did she know, the Ocean Emperor and the other great emperors had hurried over. "Xianji, you said someone told you to come?" "That's right. Why?" Xianji nodded. "Me too," said the Ocean Emperor. "I ran into someone who told me to come here no matter what. He even told my true body to come here. That's why I sent my clone to the river Styx, and my true body came here." "Actually, us too," said Great Emperor Chao Feng, pointing at him and the Bayan Emperor. "Me too," said the Hermit Emperor. Chapter 1625. The Emperor-class experts in the Alliance all encountered the same situation, which inevitably made people feel that it was a little strange. Before coming here, they'd all assumed they were the only ones who'd encountered such a situation. Now that they were talking to each other, they realized things weren't as they'd imagined. After exchanging glances, they didn't immediately enter the God Emperor's tomb. Instead, they frowned pensively and didn't speak for a long while. "Did you run into someone in white robes whose face you couldn't see clearly?" asked the Jade Lake Palace Master. The others nodded darkly. For a moment, their moods grew even heavier. Even though these great emperors were smart people, they naturally had their reasons for coming here. Still, such a strange situation inevitably made them suspicious. They wondered if they'd missed out on something they hadn't noticed. Could it be a diversion? Su Honor narrowed her eyes. The people before them were the leaders of their respective powers. In the past, they'd always stood guard over their own territories and protected them. Now that they'd all rushed here, the overall strength of their respective powers was naturally greatly reduced. Some of them agreed with Su Wan-er's suspicions, but others thought the possibility was low. "I don't think that's possible," said Chao Feng. "Even if we leave, the people we leave behind are enough to ensure that our foundations aren't shaken." The others nodded in agreement. For example, the Fox clan had Su Lu and Su Yin. Their presence alone was enough to intimidate everyone else. The Four Directions Palace had several palace masters and highnesses. The Society of Saints had many masters of the stars. Their defenses were impregnable, and the Hermit Palace was a great clan of doctors. Any doctor would be accompanied by several experts. Their defenses were needless to say. The Jade Lake had 3 great Hermit Emperor-level experts, and so did the Sea of Innocence. Although they were the leaders of their respective powers, that didn't mean they didn't have others capable of holding their own. Since they dared to leave, they definitely prepared for everything. If that person wanted to make use of the sovereign emperors to leave to destroy their lair, it could only be said that this person was thinking too simply. "I don't think we need to worry so much," said the Hermit Emperor softly, stroking his beard. The Hermit Emperor stroked his beard and said softly, "We are not children who have never seen the world before. When we met that person, we did not suspect him. Coming here is already the best proof that he has no ill intentions towards us." "I agree with the Hermit Emperor." She nodded. They were great emperors with the ability to judge for themselves. They were not 3-year-old children who could be easily fooled. Although the person whose face could not be seen clearly had never revealed his identity, they could sense from his intentions that this person did not have the slightest bit of malice towards them. Come to think of it, it's strange that the mausoleum actually fell to the lower plane. After suppressing their suspicions about the white-robed man, the great emperors looked at the tomb beneath their feet. At their level of cultivation, they naturally had a good understanding of the tomb palaces. In the past, The tomb palaces had always been in the territories of the gods, demons, and fiendish demons. The appearance of the tomb palaces was inevitable, and it was inevitable that the surrounding living beings would be plunged into misery and suffering. Before the mausoleum fell, the great emperors were worried that the mausoleum would fall near their territory. However, none of them expected it to fall here. The strength of this space is so weak that it seems like it will shatter with a single tear. The Jade Lake Palace master gently drew a line in the void, and a pitch-black crack appeared in front of her. I really don't understand why the tomb would fall here. If we were to fight here, wouldn't the entire plain be destroyed? In the past, there was a suppression of cultivation, said Xianji. I can't feel it now. The suppression of the laws around us has lessened, said the Ocean Emperor. Whether it was the location of the mausoleum or the white-robed expert they'd encountered, all of these questions lingered in the great emperor's hearts. Even with their sharp minds, they couldn't figure out the true purpose of the mausoleum. Since we're already here, we might as well take things as they come. What's the point of thinking so much? Bian laughed. I'm quite interested in the God Emperor's mausoleum. I hear that it hides a transcendent fortune. Quite a few hermit old fellows are envious of it. Just before I got here, I ran into the Northern Divine Mountain's Whitey. Whitey, he's here too. The Ocean Emperor was astonished. Whitey was one of the Northern Divine Mountain's older generation of great emperors. If you traced his lineage, you could trace it all the way back to his father's generation. However, after Whitey ascended to the throne, the old emperor no longer appeared in the public eye. Although the Northern Divine Mountain was under Shui Yang's jurisdiction, in reality, there were some people, cities, and families who weren't bound by his rule. Whitey was one of them. There are quite a few hidden Yao fellows as well, said Su Qingyan. It seems those old geezers can't sit still any longer. Bian laughed coldly. Let's not waste too much time. Although we all know transcendence isn't fated with us, I still hope the Alliance can get as many treasures as possible. Even if those old geezers who don't support us get them, I feel uncomfortable. In the end, he's not one of us. All of a sudden, a huge crack appeared in the void. Demonic winds howled within, and before long, the space around the rift became chaotic. At the same time, several experts stepped out. Zhou Wu, Su Qingyan, and the others' expressions darkened. Beside him stood Yu Qikong, Huangfu Yuming, and the Divine Arbiter. Only the Alliance's inner circle knew about the Divine Arbiter's deal with Yi Zichen. When they saw the Divine Arbiter, their hearts trembled, but they didn't show it in front of Zhou Wu. I heard you've been busy transcending, haven't you? You've already reached the threshold. I didn't think you'd come here. I never would have guessed you'd come too. It seems Emperor Zhou Wu failed his breakthrough and had no choice but to come here to try his luck, snorted Shui Yang. The Great Alliance and Zhou Wu had long since shed all pretense of cordiality. There was no need for hypocritical pleasantries. Zhou Wu, who'd rushed to the God Emperor's tomb as soon as he left seclusion, hadn't expected to run into them. When he heard the Ocean Emperor's mockery, his expression darkened. Your Majesty, please don't be angry, said Yu Qikong. Their primary goal in coming here was to obtain the fortune within the tomb. Since the gates were open, it was obvious that someone had already entered. The later they entered, the less likely they'd be to obtain the path to transcendence. Stirring up trouble with the Ocean Emperor wouldn't do them any good. Zhou Wu understood this well. Although he wanted nothing more than to kill them, he had no choice but to suppress his anger and ignore them. Chapter 1626. Kuei Lin. The Demon Emperor Kuei Lin. The God Emperor's tomb was open to all races. Experts from both the human and Yao races would come here, and so would the demons. It was just a coincidence that they'd run into each other. The three factions in the sky were as incompatible as fire and water. None of them were allies, and each wanted nothing more than to kill the other as soon as possible. But judging from the current situation, Zhou Wu's side seemed to be the weakest. What a coincidence! All of us are standing on the same side, said Kuei Lin with a calm smile. Kuei Lin smiled coolly. At his side were several demon gods, as well as the patriarchs of various tribes. Every single one of them was an emperor-level expert. In terms of numbers, Even Yi Zichen and the Great Alliance were at a disadvantage. 2 of the 3 emperors are here. I thought I'd use this opportunity to gather all 3 emperors together, but unfortunately, that Yao really is indifferent. He's not even interested in the Transcendence Tomb, laughed Kuei Lin. You'll know if he's coming or not. Zhou Wu snorted. In truth, compared to the Ocean Emperor and the others, Kuei Lin disgusted him even more, even though they'd used different methods to ascend to the throne. He really isn't coming. Kuei Lin didn't know where he'd gotten this information, but his expression was confident. The others couldn't be bothered to bicker with him. Kuei Lin looked the Ocean Emperor and Zhou Wu up and down. When I heard that the Divine Mountain Emperors were at odds with you and weren't under your command, I still didn't believe it. Now it seems, Zhou Wu, you've really been living a miserable life. That's none of your business. You'd best worry about yourselves. Zhou Wu's expression was icy as he snorted at the Ocean Emperor and the demons. Don't you dare let me take that step. If I do, I'll make you beg for death. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Wu led his pitiful subordinates into the tomb. The Demon Clan and the Great Alliance naturally wouldn't just watch him enter. Even though they wouldn't act rashly before he entered, they wouldn't let him enter the tomb first either. Several figures landed in front of the tomb. The closest of the 3 factions were practically pressed up against each other. They looked at each other, but no one attacked. Baiyan, who was walking by Zhou Wu's side, pushed him back viciously. Go stand at the back. That pair of arrogant eyes made Zhou Wu's body tremble in anger. However, he did not want to cause any trouble before entering the tomb, so he could only forcefully endure the humiliation. He was only 1 step away from transcendence. As long as he could take this step in this tomb, he would be able to reach transcendence. All these people in front of him must die. The members of the Devil Clan and the Great Alliance kept walking into the tomb. Even though they were standing in front of the door, they couldn't see the shadows of those who walked past the door. How could our God Emperor enter so late? This Baiyan really doesn't understand etiquette. He's clearly from the God race's territory, yet he pushed the God Emperor away. If this were the Devil race, this Emperor would definitely make him regret it. Lord God Emperor, your subordinates were disrespectful to you. Our demon race gave you face and allowed you to enter first. Kuei Lin mischievously gave up his seat. Humans and demons had always been at loggerheads with one another. Even if the lower-ranking supremes got along, the higher-ups would always have conflicts. He was very happy to see Zhou Wu's deflated face. The thrill of being teased made his soul feel at ease. Zhou Wu knew Kuei Lin was deliberately trying to make things difficult for him, but he made a mental note of it. He was only 1 step away from transcendence. In order to take that final step, he was willing to endure all sorts of embarrassment and humiliation. All he had to do was wait for his transcendence body. Then, all the races would be trampled beneath his feet. Zhou Wu naturally wouldn't refuse Kuei Lin's good intentions. Without hesitation, he puffed out his chest and walked toward the door. Before entering, he looked up at the words Transcendence above the tomb. Transcendence. Just a little bit more. The dream of transcendence was right in front of him. Zhou Wu's heart trembled violently. He fiercely calmed down the excitement in his heart and strode heavily towards the front door. To his surprise, the tomb was clearly open to anyone, but just as he was about to step inside, he was bounced back. What's going on? Those who hadn't yet entered the tomb began to panic. Could it be that there were already enough people inside and no one else could enter? Even Kuei Lin's smile froze when he saw this. Just one more step. Zhou Wu looked at the tomb's door in shock. He did not believe it and tried to step into the entrance crazily. However, he was blocked by an invisible barrier. Out of the way, Kuei Lin panicked. He grabbed the God Emperor's shoulder and pushed him back, then took a step forward. Interesting. With half a foot inside, Kuei Lin smiled. This tomb is rejecting you, God Emperor. It looks like your painstaking effort has no fate with transcendence. Since you can't enter, I'll go ahead first. Kuei Lin entered the tomb, followed by the rest of the demons. None of them faced any obstructions. Yao Qi and the rest, who had yet to enter, also looked at Zhou Wu in shock. When they stepped into the tomb, They also walked in effortlessly. Seeing his enemies step into the tomb one by one, Zhou Wu's heart felt like it was being gripped by someone. It was hard to bear. No fate with transcendence. Kuei Lin's words reverberated in his mind like a demonic tune. He took another step forward. As expected, he was bounced back by the barrier. Your Majesty, why don't we? Yu Qi-Kong, who was at Zhou Wu's side, couldn't help but open his mouth in a probing manner. His words meant that he wanted them to go in. Zhou Wu was so angry after hearing this that it was as if a sea of flames had erupted. This emperor hasn't gone in yet. What's the use of you going in? The surging aura caused Yu Qi-Kong to hang his head resentfully. Soon after, Zhou Wu looked at him with even sharper eyes. What? You want to go in and try your luck? Maybe you'll encounter some transcendence fortune and no longer be a slave? You're thinking of turning things around, aren't you? God Emperor, you're overthinking things, Yu Qi-Kong said through clenched teeth. Who would have thought that the silent Huangfu Yuming would tug at Yu Qi-Kong fiercely? Unprecedented ambition could be seen in his eyes. What's there to be afraid of? He doesn't even have the fortune to transcend anymore. Why should we submit to others? I'm sorry, God Emperor. Transcendence is a realm everyone yearns for even in their dreams. We've already come this far, so there's no need for us to give up this opportunity just because you can't enter the mausoleum. All right, don't even think about doing anything to my clan. If I transcend, you know what the consequences will be. Huangfu Yuming walked into the mausoleum without so much as a backward glance. There were no obstructions either. Yu Qi-Kong watched the scene with his head lowered. He gritted his teeth and ignored Zhou Wu as he walked inside. For a moment, only Zhou Wu and the Divine Arbiter remained outside. Are you going to betray me too? Zhou Wu asked, his eyes red. I'll never betray you. The Divine Arbiter's expression was indescribably gentle as she spoke. She pitied Zhou Wu. Yu Qi-Kong and Huangfu Yuming were both people he'd carefully cultivated. Who would have thought they'd leave on his back before they could truly use their martial arts? The betrayed Zhou Wu seemed to find some comfort in the Divine Arbiter's words. He raised his hand and gently stroked the Divine Arbiter's cheek. It was the face he'd once been infatuated with. The Divine Arbiter's eyes flickered with tenderness as Zhou Wu caressed her. She gently lifted her hand and placed it over his, as if she wanted to give him some warmth after his betrayal. Go in. Zhou Wu suddenly lowered his hand and spoke to the Divine Arbiter in an extremely gentle tone. If you can't enter, then I won't. I told you, I'll never betray you. The Divine Arbiter grabbed Zhou Wu's hand and smiled gently. I know. Zhou Wu nodded lightly, a rare hint of gentleness in his eyes. I know you'll never betray me. To tell the truth, the betrayal of those two animals, Yu Qi-Kong and Huangfu Yuming, has chilled my heart. But their words weren't wrong. Before transcendence, everyone is equal. The mausoleum's openness means everyone has a chance. The same goes for you. Rather than them obtaining the inheritance, I'd rather you obtain it. Zhou Wu, don't say any more. Go in. Zhou Wu struggled free of the Divine Arbiter's grip, then pushed the door open, pushing the Divine Arbiter inside. They were all inside. No one else had been obstructed like him. Only Zhou Wu stood alone outside the mausoleum. He gnashed his teeth as he looked at the solemn mausoleum before him. Transcendence, the realm he'd dreamed of reaching. From Yi Zichen's words, Zhou Wu gained a new understanding of transcendence. Because of this new understanding, Zhou Wu's cultivation, which had been stagnant for so long, began to improve. As time passed, and as he combined his own understanding, he grew ever closer to transcendence. But for some reason, this fruit, which had seemed so close to his grasp, always felt as if he were missing the final step. He'd stolen the 5 elements' great emperor's celestial fate, then stolen the Lord of the myriad stars' celestial bodies. Everything he'd done had been for the sake of taking the step he'd always dreamed of. But why? It was as if the entire world was trying to stop him. Even the Transcendence Mausoleum, which could accommodate all races, had a barrier right before he'd stepped inside. No matter what, he couldn't enter. Was he really not fated to do so? He didn't believe it. His fate was in his own hands. Raging flames burned in Zhou Wu's hands. They seemed as if they wanted to evaporate the entire world, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding space. Chapter 16:27. A soft murmur came from the stone statue in front of the tomb. Zhou Wu stopped his fiery fist and took a few steps back. The stone statue was still a stone statue. Even in Zhou Wu's realm, he couldn't sense any aura from it. He stared at the stone statue with his red eyes. The raging fire around his body evaporated all the water in the howling canyon, and the cracked ground was trampled by his feet. I want to know the reason. Epics had an end and were unchanging. However, the heavens seemed to leave a chance for the people in the epic. It was this tomb that hid the transcendent opportunity. The tomb did not reject anyone. It had been like this since ancient times. Be it the demon race, or the human race, even the magi race, they would not reject anyone who had the ability to seize the opportunity. Zhou Wu, he was the only one from ancient times to the present. If one were to look at this matter from another perspective, Zhou Wu being the first person to be rejected at the door could also be seen as a special honor. However, he desired transcendence too much. He desired it so much that he would do anything to achieve his goal. In order to take this step, he had sacrificed too much. This was clearly his last and best hope, but his hope had been forcibly snuffed out. He found it hard to accept and had no way of accepting it. He questioned it because he wanted to resolve the doubts in his heart. It didn't mean that he would give up on this final possibility. Not answering, for a long time, the stone statue didn't communicate with him. His eyes, which had calmed down slightly, instantly became extremely violent. Heat waves visible to the naked eye covered the sky. With him, as the center, the area tens of thousands of miles around him was branded with a fiery barrier. Everything within the barrier withered and burned, turning into a sea of flames. The tomb was also being roasted by the flames. However, no matter how his flames surged, they couldn't shake the tomb at all. Not even the smallest spark appeared. Give up. Zhou Wu's stubbornness made the stone statue sigh. This time Zhou Wu saw it. The sigh came from a second stone statue to the left of the tomb's main entrance. Why should I give up? Zhou Wu glared at the stone statue and roared. Why don't you understand? You don't have the life to transcend, so why are you so stubborn about this tomb? The stone statue still sighed. Not destined to transcend. Zhou Wu laughed for some baffling reason. If others were to hear such an explanation, especially from the stone statue in front of the Transcendence tomb, they might really turn around and leave in sorrow. However, he had never believed in fate. Back when the Five Elements' great emperor had been favored by the Emperor's Star, someone had told him that he wasn't fated to be chosen by the Emperor's Star. What happened after that? He obtained the Imperial Star's celestial fate and sat on the throne of the God Emperor. As for the Five Elements, who was revered by all races, he died in his own painting, and even his corpse was buried in the mountains and rivers in his painting. Destiny had always been obtained by one's own hands. How laughable! The black-faced Zhou Wu's expression was extremely ferocious. His meticulously combed hair was now disheveled. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire, and his veins were bulging. It was a clear indication of how angry he was. The blazing Zhou Wu made the starlight of the Nirvana sky dim somewhat. Even from millions of miles away, one could see the flames in the howling canyon soaring into the sky, and the heavy flame breath was like a volcano that was about to erupt. What's going on with the immortal region? Countless immortals had gathered in front of the South Heaven's Gate. When they saw the blazing flames in the howling canyon, they felt an oppressive, suffocating aura. They had been here when the barrier outside the tomb shattered and released the golden red light. They could clearly sense the difference between the flames and the golden red light from before. All-seeing eyes, look. The Clairaudient at the South Heaven's Gate patted his brother on the shoulder, but he didn't expect all-seeing eyes to shrink back in fear. He didn't dare use his immortal power to peer into the howling canyon. Look at how scared you are. He rolled his eyes at all-seeing eyes, then went to listen in on the situation. To his surprise, a barrier suddenly appeared around him. When he turned around, he saw the golden-robed Queen Mother of the Golden Arches walking out of the cloudy palace of the Golden Arches. Queen Mother of the Golden Arches. The immortals kowtowed. The Queen Mother waved her hand to disperse the barrier around Clairaudient, then looked at the blazing flames in the distance. Go back. During this time, no one is allowed to take even half a step out of the heavenly palace. If you disobey, then even golden immortals of the great firmament won't be able to save you. Don't even think about spying on what's going on there. All you need to do is pray that this calamity won't befall the heavenly palace. Due to the appearance of the God Emperor's tomb, those who came here were all peak experts who stood at the apex of the divine, Yao, and demon realms. This was naturally a calamity for all living beings in the lower realms. At the same time the Queen Mother gave the order, the underworld sent out a nearly identical one. Even if they needed to reap the souls of the dead in the near future, soul-reaping envoys were not to leave the underworld. The immortals in Yao of the Endless Beast region and the Immortal region, who had long since left the territories outside the sacred land, also saw the blazing flames. When they felt the heavy pressure, the only thing they could do was pray that the calamity wouldn't befall them. The only thing they could do was pray that the calamity wouldn't befall them. Fire doesn't suit you. The stone statue in front of the tomb commented on Zhou Wu's flames, which threatened to incinerate the entire world. Perhaps fire really didn't suit Zhou Wu. Although the flames around him looked fierce from the outside, upon closer inspection, one would realize that the fire elemental essences around him were completely suppressed by his martial power. They weren't willing to work for him. This kind of suppression by force could cause a fatal backlash if one was careless. Not suited, in my eyes. There's no such thing as suitable or unsuitable. There's only submission and non-submission. With that, Zhou Wu used an even fiercer method to gather the surrounding fire elemental essences around him. With his overwhelming martial power, the fire elemental essences had no choice but to humble themselves and work for him. The flames around Zhou Wu turned from orange-red to lustrous white, then from lustrous white to a bit of frost. Open the door to the tomb for this emperor, otherwise don't blame this emperor for destroying your transcendence tomb. If I'm not mistaken, the new emperor star should be inside. If you don't want to die, then let me in. Tyrannical, cruel, savage. Zhou Wu's expression was incomparably ferocious. The flames under his control became even more violent. It was as if they could burn the entire lower plane to ashes with a single command from Zhou Wu. Actually, your abilities are a great help against the Outer Realm Celestials. Seeing that your cultivation wasn't easy to come by, I tried to persuade you, but you didn't listen at all, the stone statue said with a sigh. Cut the crap. Are you going to let me in or not? Zhou was like a madman. As long as the stone statue didn't let him in, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice the entire lower plane for his transcendence path. Then go ahead and try. The kind-hearted stone statue lost its patience with the crazed Zhou Wu. It shut its mouth after saying that. Zhou Wu did not hesitate at all as he engulfed the entire tomb in raging flames. This time, the flames were clearly a few levels higher than the flames from before. The mountain of the tomb actually showed faint signs of melting. Icebound 1,000 miles. Suddenly, a delicate shout sounded from the void. The temperature of the fire in the howling canyon dropped to the extreme the moment the delicate shout appeared. Then, the flames surrounding the tomb were frozen into ice crystals. The ice crystals fell to the ground and shattered, while the flames dissipated. However, the flames around Zhou Wu continued burning, melting the ice crystals on the ground into water. They turned into mist, covering the entire howling gorge with a hazy veil. Silly dog, you want to destroy the tomb without asking us first. Accompanied by a hearty shout, a wooden pole pierced through the mist and landed on Zhou Wu's back. The moment the wooden pole came into contact with the flames on Zhou Wu's back, it was burned to charcoal. It didn't pose any threat to Zhou Wu. Are you sure you can do it? A reproachful voice appeared in the mist. Is this my fault? If Big Sis Su had sealed the ice on his back, would I be so embarrassing? The person who had attacked with the pole harumphed. What does it have to do with me? A cold female voice sounded from mist. How does it have nothing to do with you? I clearly told you before that my pole was an ordinary wooden pole. You had to freeze his fire while I ambushed him. Great, the opportunity for a sneak attack was wasted. Did I seal the fire? If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll seal it for you. Hey, don't go overboard. I'm the Minister of the Right, the second of the 4 auxiliary stars. Your star of martial songs is rank 4th. I think you really want to be sealed. Although he couldn't see what was happening above due to the hazy mist, Zhou could feel that the surrounding temperature had dropped significantly. It was as if the woman above was really going to attack her companion. Big Sis Sue calmed down. A Hogue is just like that. A Hogue, don't provoke Big Sis Sue. If you really fight, you might not be able to beat him. She's the star of martial songs. Just based on a star, you should know that. I can't be bothered to bicker with him. If my sneak attack didn't work, I'll end it quickly. Xiao Yuli is still waiting for me at home. As they spoke, the rising mist became much thinner. Zhou looked up into the sky and saw 4 people standing in 4 directions above him. The ones below. The one who spoke was the person with a Hogue. Hurry up and go back to your God of Heaven Mountain. This mausoleum doesn't have any good fortune for you. You should know who we are. We're this era's 4 auxiliary stars. If you don't want to die, what's the point of saying that to him? A Hogue was still shooting his mouth off in the sky. He didn't expect that the others had already swooped down towards Zhou Wu. Hey, you guys, a Hogue gritted his teeth in anger when he saw this. Although they were the 4 auxiliary stars, they hadn't really interacted with them before. They had only gathered here because the previous 4 auxiliary stars had found them with their divine senses. His original intention was to scare Zhou Wu and pretend to be an idiot in passing. Chapter 1628. Drip. Within the pitch-black hallway, the sound of flowing water made it seem even more secluded. Yi Zichen stood alone in the center of the hallway. As for Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others, they weren't by his side. After he entered the mausoleum, he appeared in the hallway. He was certain that this was the interior of the mausoleum. As for why his companions weren't by his side, it was obvious that there was a teleportation formation at the entrance to the mausoleum. Everyone who entered the mausoleum would be sent to different locations. The mausoleum's soundproofing was excellent. Even the sound of water dripping could be heard clearly. He naturally had no way of knowing about the battle between the 4 auxiliary stars and Zhou Wu. What the hell is this place? Yi Zichen couldn't help but mutter to himself. The hallway was very dark, and unlike other secret realms, which had wall fires, he could only use his own flames to provide some light. The hallway wasn't very wide, only about 2 meters or so. However, it was very long, at least in Yi Zichen's eyes. Through his phone, Yi Zichen knew that he'd already been walking for more than 2 hours. Given his speed, 2 hours was more than enough for him to travel from the immortal region to the endless beast region. The mausoleum was only so big. Even if he occupied the entire Howling Valley, 2 hours was more than enough for him to walk from one end of the mausoleum to the other. However, he hadn't even walked out of the hallway. In fact, he hadn't even seen a single corner. F***, I've been possessed. Yi Zichen, who was still walking down the hallway, suddenly stopped. He stared fixedly at a mark on the wall, unable to speak for a long time. The mark was very new. From the looks of it, it had been carved no more than an hour ago. Of course, Yi Zichen had made that mark. An hour ago, Yi Zichen had sensed that there was something wrong with the hallway. The Howling Valley wasn't that big, and the mausoleum was located right above it. His hallway couldn't possibly be that long. Yi Zichen hadn't walked out of the mausoleum even after an hour. He'd only left a mark on the wall. He'd left it in order to confirm whether or not he'd been walking in place all this time. He hadn't expected that to be the case. What's going on? This was completely different from what Yi Zichen had expected. He'd expected to see palaces and perhaps even the God Emperor's burial chamber. These palaces and tombs all hid rare treasures, and those who came in would fight over these rare treasures. However, this tomb was like a maze. No, it couldn't even be considered a maze. It was just a long corridor, to the point where one started to doubt life itself. Those who had transcended the creation realm would obviously not hide in such a maze that made people collapse. He also did not think that this was the true appearance of the tomb. If that was the case, he would have seen a lot of people in this corridor, and he wouldn't be alone. This was merely the first trial before entering the real tomb. The real fortune was yet to come, but Yi Zichen was stuck at the first trial. Reasoning was very taxing on the brain. Yi Zichen didn't like to think about it when he played the escape room in the modern realm. It was the same for escaping from a secret room with a hint, let alone a long corridor with no hint at all. Regardless of whether it was the marble stones under his feet or the limestone embedded in the walls, no one could see anything special about them. Song Xiong held a fruit in his hands that Yi Zichen didn't know where he'd gotten it. In any case, it was shockingly large. Given Yi Zichen's size, he'd probably need both hands to grasp it. He grinned and bit into the fruit, but as he ate, he didn't forget to insult Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen had run into Song Xiong because he'd entered the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. He was truly helpless against the long corridor, and he didn't want to waste too much time there. He wanted to ask the Yao emperors if they knew anything about this place. However, the results disappointed him. Little friend Yi, there's nothing we can do. Qinglan's smile was as kind as ever. Of the 3 Yao emperors, he was the kindest to Yi Zichen. He'd carefully listened to Yi Zichen's troubles. He wanted to help, but there was nothing he could do. We've never entered the God Emperor's tomb you speak of, so we naturally don't understand the situation there. You came here to ask us, but we can't give you any good advice, said Qinglan. In truth, Yi Zichen had long since anticipated this outcome. Now that Qinglan had confirmed it, he slumped back into his chair like a deflated balloon, utterly dejected. How exactly was he supposed to get out of that crappy corridor? When he thought of that pitch-black corridor without a single person in sight, Yi Zichen felt a headache coming on. What a brainless brat, snorted Song Xiong. Yi Zichen was already furious, so he didn't care if Song Xiong was a Yao emperor or not. He glared at Song Xiong and said, "You're the only one with brains. If you had brains, why don't you help me figure out the corridor's secret? Why should I listen to you?" Snorted Song Xiong. "Don't I have one chance to order you around? I'm going to use it now," said Yi Zichen. "Hey, you might be misunderstanding something. We only helped you once because your life was in danger. Now, even if you're trapped in that corridor, you have no enemies. Why should I help you?" said Song Xiong. "If you can't figure it out, then you can't figure it out. Don't waste your breath," said Yi Zichen. "What if I break it? Let's talk about that after you figure it out. If you can figure it out, go ahead. If you can't, then hurry back to your residence. Just looking at you annoys me. Get me out of here." Song Xiong was furious. He slapped the table and tried to break through the corridor, but before he left, he didn't forget to say goodbye to Qinglan. "Big brother Qinglan, I'll be right back." "Go on." Qinglan giggled and waved, but didn't try to stop him. Yi Zichen looked Song Xiong up and down, then said nothing else. He cupped his hands at Qinglan, then left the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Not long after he and Song Xiong left, a fiery light appeared where Song Xiong had just been sitting. "You clearly had the map. Why didn't you give it to him?" asked Qinglan. "Why would I give it to him?" The fiery figure's eyes were filled with disdain. Qinglan glanced at him and couldn't help but sigh. "Are you still angry at the 5 Elements Great Emperor? Actually, that kid isn't even his descendant. Furthermore, he seems pure and kind, and you can see the kindness in his eyes. If you explain things to him clearly, he'll let you leave." "There's no need," snorted the fiery figure. "Why would I leave? I'm fine here. Besides, I really did lose to the 5 Elements Great Emperor back then. There's nothing to argue about. A loss is a loss. You go find. Don't mention him. I have nothing to do with him." The fiery figure rose to his feet. His face was shrouded in flames, and it was impossible to see his face clearly. He muttered resentfully, "From the moment he chased me out, we had nothing to do with each other." As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at Qinglan. "Right, in the future, don't even bother telling me when that kid comes. He can't even pass the mausoleum's simplest trial. I doubt he'll ever transcend. Even if you have high hopes for him, I can't see any." "You're talking about this crappy place?" After leaving the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Yi Zichen led Song Xiong to the long corridor. Song Xiong was tall and sturdy, so the 2-meter-wide corridor wasn't big enough for him. That's the place. If you're strong enough, take me out of here, said Yi Zichen. It's just a small matter. Song Xiong squeezed his way into the corridor, making it difficult for him to bear. He twisted his arms and saw that his previously burly body, which filled the entire corridor, had shrunk somewhat. Even so, Yi Zichen was still pitifully small in front of him. Come with me. There's no doubt some damned formation engraved in this corridor. Once we find the eye of the formation, break it, and everything will be over. Song Xiong swung his arms around like a gangster boss. Yi Zichen was speechless when he saw Song Xiong's logical explanation. And here he thought Song Xiong had some good idea. But wasn't that all he'd gotten? Everyone knew that the reason they couldn't leave was because of a formation. Yi Zichen had figured out long ago. So he'd been searching for the eye of the formation. 6 hours. But he hadn't found it. Yi Zichen was certain that he'd already been careful enough. Furthermore, he had Su Yun, a spiritual formation grandmaster, by his side. Although Song Xiong wasn't an expert, he learned a thing or two about formations from Su Yun. If he still hadn't found the eye, Yi Zichen didn't believe that a gruff man like Song Xiong could possibly be an expert in formations and discover the corridor secrets. In truth, Song Xiong really wasn't a formation grandmaster. Never mind a formation grandmaster. He didn't even know the slightest thing about spiritual formations. He'd only come out because of the fire in his heart. As for what he'd said just now, he'd only memorized a few lines back in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Qinglan would occasionally look at some formation diagrams. The way he saw it, breaking the formation was actually very simple, because Qinglan always seemed so relaxed. Yi Zichen didn't know how much time passed in the pitch-black corridor. All he knew was that Song Xiong's eyes were wide open as he paced back and forth. From time to time, he'd stop and look at something, then turn around and continue on. In truth, there really was something where he'd stopped. They were all marks Yi Zichen had left behind. Judging by the marks, Yi Zichen knew that they'd already circled the corridor at least 6 times. How is it, Grandmaster Song? Did you find anything? When Yi Zichen saw that Song Xiong couldn't figure out what was going on, he wasn't as angry anymore. He smiled at Song Xiong, eager to see his defeated expression. Song Xiong had always looked down on him, and now he was just like this. Shut up. We've already circled the corridor 6 times, said Yi Zichen. Suddenly, Song Xiong stopped and stared intently at Yi Zichen. What did you say? No way. Didn't you notice? We've already circled the corridor 6 or 7 times. The marks you stopped to look at earlier were all left by me. Yi Zichen was speechless. Song Xiong hadn't even noticed, and he'd promised to lead him out of the corridor? Chapter 1629. All brawn and no brains. This was the most suitable description for Song Xiong. Earlier, Yi Zichen thought that if Song Xiong stopped and looked at the scratches, he'd notice something. He never would have guessed that the one-track mind of the Yao race great emperor wouldn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Worse, he was stubborn. Yi Zichen had already told him very clearly, but not only did he refuse, he even left angrily. Asking him out was definitely the wrong choice. Yi Zichen couldn't help but think. Yi Zichen wandered around the strange, pitch-black hallway. At first, they weren't aimless. They were looking for the eye of the spiritual formation. However, since they couldn't find it after so long, Yi Zichen lost his passion to search for it. Yi Zichen wasn't sure if it was the same for Song Xiong. In any case, Yi Zichen was too lazy to continue searching. It's so damn strange. After walking around a few more times, it was clear that Song Xiong remembered Yi Zichen's warning. When he noticed that Song Xiong had returned to the place where he had left the scratch, he stopped and couldn't help but curse. How about we go back and find Mr. Green Lawn? Asked Yi Zichen. After going around in circles, they still couldn't find any clues. No one knew if the other people who entered the tomb had already left through the corridor. If he continued to delay like this, he might not be able to transcend the creation realm. None of that mattered. What he cared about the most was the soul grass. Shui Mo was still lying in bed, waiting for the soul grass to save her life. To be honest, Song Xiong actually thought that Qinglan would be much better off than him. He was not as meticulous as Qinglan. No matter what he did, he liked to do it simply and crudely. He was not suitable for this kind of confusing question. If it weren't for the fact that the successor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, whom he could crush to death with his bare hands, was so disdainful of him. It was also because he was hot-headed, otherwise he wouldn't have boasted so much. Now that the words had been said, if it didn't bring him out of this broken corridor, he would definitely be slandered by the little fellow behind him. There's no need to trouble Brother Qinglan with such a small matter. Song Xiong refused flatly. It's okay if you don't want to find Mr. Qinglan, but you have to take me out. Boss Song Xiong, it's not like you don't know how many times we've circled around here. The others might have already passed the first checkpoint. If we're late, we'll always fall behind, said Yi Zichen anxiously. Calm down. Suddenly, Song Xiong's body straightened up by quite a bit. Demon spiritual energy surged out from his body. Even at Yi Zichen's current level, he found it hard to withstand the demonic winds. Although he'd already set up a barrier as soon as he could, the demonic winds still left several bloody gashes on his body. What are you trying to do? Don't fly into a rage out of humiliation. Do you want to kill me here? Yi Zichen took a few steps back. Song Xiong had never gotten along with him in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. There was no telling if Song Xiong's words had truly angered him to the point of wanting to kill his master in the deserted hallway. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda truly did contain the slave imprints of its Yao servants. As the head of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Song Xiong could instantly wipe out any Yao servant who tried to kill its master. That was why Yao servants were absolutely loyal. Yi Zichen carefully retreated to a safe position, then sized Song Xiong up and down. He was observing to see if Song Xiong would do anything out of the ordinary. If he really did attack, Yi Zichen wouldn't hesitate to crush his slave imprint. It didn't matter if Song Xiong was a Yao emperor or if he'd be of great help in the future. Kid, watch closely and see how I get you out of here. Obviously, Yi Zichen was overthinking things. Song Xiong had no intention of attacking him at all. Yi Zichen had only been injured by the demonic winds earlier. After that, Song Xiong hadn't attacked him at all. Instead, he stared intently at the wall. Yi Zichen could tell from his expression what this simple-minded guy was up to. You're not planning on destroying this hallway, are you? What's wrong with that? His fist smashed into the wall with the force of 1,000 kilograms. This punch caused quite a bit of damage to the corridor. The entire corridor shook violently, and countless gravel and dust fell from the top of the corridor. When he looked at the wall, he saw that it was already covered in visible cracks. You built it pretty hard. Song Xiong grinned fiercely. His right arm seemed to have grown several times thicker than before. If you really compared it, it was almost as thick as Yi Zichen's waist. A hazy, greenish-orange brilliance was released from his arm. The blood vessels and veins on his arm were bulging, indicating just how powerful this punch was. Break for me. The hallway rumbled without end. When Song Xiong's fist landed, the tremors grew even more pronounced. From the looks of it, the hallway was on the verge of collapse. Boss Song Xiong, keep it up. Otherwise, we'll both be buried here, shouted Yi Zichen. The walls were far sturdier than Song Xiong had expected. Song Xiong was well aware of his own strength. Even an ordinary emperor-level expert would be crippled by a single punch from him. Song Xiong had just punched twice with all his might, and even used his innate talent for the second punch. Yet, the walls of the hallway still hadn't collapsed. Song Xiong also heard Yi Zichen shout. Just as he was about to shout back, he noticed that Yi Zichen had placed a barrier over his head to prevent the rocks from falling on him. Song Xiong was a body-tempering Yao, so this sort of collision was nothing to him. Even if the rocks did hit him, it wouldn't hurt him at all. However, Yi Zichen had done this out of goodwill. Song Xiong had a bad temper, but that didn't mean he was unreasonable. Yi Zichen looked up at the falling rocks. It really was strange. Boulders continuously fell from the hallway, but the ceiling didn't crack at all. This hallway was truly strange. If it didn't get out, they might really be buried here. Iron mountains smashed. In order to shatter the walls as quickly as possible, Song Xiong no longer held back. He roared angrily, clenched his left hand, and slammed into the wall. Rumble. I never would have guessed there would be a kindred spirit. Just as Yi Zichen expected, someone else had already walked out of the hallway before him. A youth in blue robes was wandering aimlessly around the mausoleum's walls when he sensed a nearby tremor. He couldn't help but stop, smile, and mutter to himself. When he arrived at the source of the tremors, he saw Yi Zichen, who just climbed out of the hallway, floating in the air. And he was the only one. After smashing open the mausoleum, Song Xiong sensed people nearby, so he returned to the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. However, before he left, he didn't forget to show off to Yi Zichen and remind him that he owed him a favor. As expected, the hallway was an independent space. After leaving the hallway, Yi Zichen appeared directly in the air above the mausoleum's walls. When he turned around, there was only empty space behind him. There was no trace of the strange hallway. "Friend," the youth in blue robes laughed heartily. Before leaving, Song Xiong had told Yi Zichen that there were people nearby. When Yi Zichen dusted himself off, he sensed the youth's presence. However, he still put on a look of surprise as he glanced at the young man. There was a hint of wariness in his eyes as he landed about 10 meters away from the young man. The youth sensed Yi Zichen's wariness. He shrugged, smiled, and acted as if he didn't mean any harm. "Who are you?" Yi Zichen stared at the youth. He didn't look familiar at all, but anyone who could enter the mausoleum was at least an emperor-level expert. "I am Go Monin, a Yao from the Northern Kingdom." The youth was refined and courteous. When he introduced himself, he even bowed slightly. The Yao Northern Kingdom. After hearing the youth's introduction, Yi Zichen had a somewhat favorable impression of him. Of the 4 Yao kingdoms, the southern and western regions had bad blood, with Yi Zichen and the others. The Northern Kingdom, on the other hand, was a place of simple and honest people. Gu Zichen, a god. Yi Zichen kept an eye on him. "Brother, so you're a god?" Without any surprise, the young man smiled and said, "Our Northern Kingdom loves to deal with the god race. Before, I was worried that the first one we would meet would be the demon race, or the people of the Southern Kingdom or the Western regions. If we met them, we would inevitably have a fierce battle. Brother Gu, I can finally put my worries to rest. Forget about the demons, but do you think you'll fight the Southern and Western regions?" asked Yi Zichen. "Brother Gu, you don't know this, but our Yao have long since split up. The Eastern Emperor, the Yao Emperor, doesn't care about trifling matters like this. The Southern and Western regions joined forces, but our Northern Kingdom doesn't like fighting and wants to remain neutral, but he won't give us the chance. The other 2 countries view us as enemies," sighed Go Monin. "You can work with the Eastern Kingdom," said Yi Zichen. "Brother Gu, I told you before, our Northern Kingdom doesn't like fighting. Right now, the Eastern State is led by the 9-tailed Fox clan. I heard that the Fox clan is close to the God Realm, especially the master of the 10th Divine Mountain. I think his name is Yi Zichen. Hey, Brother Gu, your name is really similar to his." Suddenly, Go Monin smiled at Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen smiled, but said nothing. In truth, he'd already expected all of these questions. He'd asked this because he wanted to see if this guy was really from the Northern Kingdom. Everyone had to be on their guard after entering the God Emperor's tomb. Who knew which faction this guy who called himself from the Northern Kingdom belonged to? However, after a few exchanges, this guy's explanation was flawless. He really did look like someone from the Northern Kingdom. Yi Zichen had been stuck in the hallway for far too long, so he didn't know much about the situation inside. Furthermore, everyone who entered had been scattered all over the place. If he moved around alone, it was inevitable he'd run into enemies outside. Chapter 16:30. Brother Gu, where in the God Clan are you from? Go Monin carefully released his Yao awareness to survey their surroundings, but didn't forget to chat with Yi Zichen. After some thought, Yi Zichen decided to go with Go Monin. Although Go Monin wasn't as trustworthy as Yang Jian and company, it was still safer to go with him than to go alone. "Northern Divine Mountain," said Yi Zichen. "Are there ancient clans in the Northern Divine Mountain?" Go Monin seemed extremely familiar with the Northern Divine Mountain. When Yi Zichen heard his words, he couldn't help but arch his brows. "Brother Go, are you familiar with the Northern Divine Mountain?" The words Brother Go caused an awkward expression to flash across Go Monin's face. "Brother Gu, just call me Mo Nan. This Brother Go ha." Yi Zichen also noticed that this form of address wasn't very nice. He chuckled, then looked towards Go Monin. He didn't reply to Yi Zichen's question. I'm pretty familiar with the Northern Divine Mountain. My younger sister married the eldest son of the Northern Divine Mountain's D family, D Jiao. She was fortunate enough to stay there for a while, said Gomonin. Oh, like this. Yi Zichen nodded. He had some understanding of the D family. D Long was a member of the D family, and the D family wasn't exactly a small family on the Northern Divine Mountain. Our Gu family isn't some big family. We definitely can't compare to Madame D. Yi Zichen smiled. Brother Gu is too humble. How can anyone who can enter the tomb be an ordinary person? For a clan to be able to nurture a hero like you, it can't be the small clan that Brother Gu speaks of. It appears that Brother Gu's clan is one of those hidden clans, Gomonin analyzed. Yi Zichen didn't bother explaining himself. He simply smiled and used the most ambiguous response to cover it up. Seeing that Yi Zichen didn't want to talk too much about his family, Gomonin didn't ask any further. Thus, the two of them continued to search for the so-called fortune within the tomb. The God Emperor tomb could also be said to be the Transcendence tomb. The internal structure was not like a tomb, but more like a magnificent palace. The city walls were red in color and towered into the clouds. The road beneath their feet was also completely paved with granite. The structure of the palace was very complicated. This time, it was not as strange as the long corridor. There were many corners on the city wall, and at the corners, one could see many doors to courtyards. Yi Zichen and the others had gone inside to take a look as well, but it was empty. Forget Transcendence cultivators, they didn't even see a single pill or treasure. Brother Amo Nan, you must have been here for a while before you met me, right? Asked Yi Zichen. I won't hide it from you, Brother Gu. Before I met you, I had been walking for a long time. Along the way, I encountered a very bloody scene. Gomonin nodded. Blood? Yi Zichen frowned. He didn't quite understand Gomonin's words. Was he trying to say that he had met other people before, and more than one? As for blood, it must be when one of them killed the other. Brother Imo Nan, could you tell me in detail? Asked Yi Zichen. Brother Gu, do you really want to listen? A look of fear flashed in Gomonin's eyes. After looking around, he lowered his voice and said, not long ago, the bloody scene Gomonin described was just as Yi Zichen thought. There were other people there. Gomonin had just left the hallway, and this was where he'd landed. Gomonin, who just entered the mausoleum, was actually quite curious. Furthermore, he'd never seen such a majestic palace in the north, so he wandered around like a tourist. Just as he was admiring the majestic palace, the thick scent of blood wafted into his nostrils. Someone was here. Anyone who could enter the God Emperor's mausoleum wasn't some greenhorn. No matter how naive Gomonin was, he knew that there were people nearby, and that someone had been killed. He had wanted to leave, but for some strange reason, he walked towards the bloody grounds. In one of the courtyards, he saw a man with a head full of silver hair. His back was facing the door, and his body was covered in blood. In front of him was a man who no longer had any signs of life. Let me tell you, Brother Gu, it's a good thing I ran fast. Otherwise, you might not even have been able to see me. Gomonin patted his chest, his heart pounding with fear. The way he saw it, that man was absolutely ruthless. If he'd sensed him, he might have died there. As for the dead man, that was his fate. You're pretty lucky, said Yi Zichen. Gomonin couldn't help but nod. Let's go take a look, said Yi Zichen suddenly. When Gomonin heard that, his eyes widened to the size of copper bells, and his mouth gaped so wide you could fit an egg inside. Brother Gu, you're crazy. Why do you say that, Brother Monin? That's a guy who kills without batting an eye. Judging from his aura, I don't think I'm a match for him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have fled in such a panic. If you go now, won't you just walk right into a trap? Brother Gu, don't blame me for being too outspoken, but your aura is even weaker than mine. Said Gomonin. What's there to be afraid of? The guy most likely killed someone because they ran into some treasure and got into a fight. You said it happened when you first got here. It's been so long, yet he's still there? I'm just curious, so I want to go take a look. If you're worried something might happen, just tell me where it is. I'll go myself, said Yi Zichen. How is I? Gomonin, someone who's afraid of death. If Brother Gu wants to go, then I'll take Brother Gu there. Yi Zichen followed Gomonin for more than an hour. It was all thanks to Gomonin leading the way. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for Yi Zichen to find that bloody place, just based on Go Monen's description. Walking was one thing, but the two of them had to pass through 2 courtyards in order to get there. As for the bloody scene that Go Monen said he saw, it was actually at a hidden door in the last courtyard. The hidden door was completely covered by leaves, and it would have been very difficult to discover it if it wasn't for the creator. It's here. Go Monen pointed at the arched door behind the leaves. I can't believe you were able to find this place. Yi Zichen was rather speechless. Go Monen scratched his head in embarrassment, while looking very honest. Then he pointed at his nose with a coy smile. I'm rather sensitive to smells. I'm naturally rather sensitive to smells. Sensitive to smells? Yi Zichen raised his eyebrows. Yeah, Brother Gu should be able to tell from my surname, right? I'm actually a dog, said Go Monen. Hearing that, Yi Zichen nodded. Dogs are indeed rather sensitive to smells. Back in the day, Little White's nose had been extremely sensitive. When he mentioned Little White, he really did miss him. When he first arrived on the 10th Divine Mountain, the two of them hadn't talked much before being sent into the Divine Artifact of Time. Yi Zichen had no idea what level Little White had reached after all this time. Brother Gu, should we go in? Go Monen asked tentatively. Since we're already here, we naturally have to go in and take a look. Yi Zichen was just about to enter the hidden door when Go Monen grabbed him. Be careful, he might still be inside. Stop messing around. We're already standing in front of his door. If we were discovered, we would have been discovered long ago. Yi Zichen didn't think too much about it. After passing through the cover of the leaves, he saw a completely different world. An arched door stood behind the leaves, revealing a small courtyard with no rooms. If this really was the Imperial Palace, then the only people living inside were either princes or the Imperial concubines. When he looked at the layout of the courtyard, it seemed more likely that this was a female residence. The Imperial concubine had created this hidden door. Could it be that she? But the Imperial Palace was filled with eunuchs, so there was no way for the Imperial concubines to follow them. Perhaps it was even the palace guards. In the end, the Emperor was just one person. He had 3,000 beauties in his harem, and even if he wanted to pamper them all, he didn't have the strength to do so. It was inevitable that the cold-shouldered Imperial concubines would do something like this. Just the thought of it made him feel a little embarrassed. However, Yi Zichen was in no mood to think about it. The stench of blood washed over him. When he entered the courtyard, he really did see the bloody scene Go Monen had described. To tell the truth, the visual impact of seeing it with his own eyes was far greater than what Go Monen had described. The entire courtyard was covered in corpses. Rather than corpses, it was more like dismembered corpses. The corpses had been cut into several pieces and tossed around the courtyard. As for the cruel dismemberer, he seemed to have a strange hobby. He kept his body parts in the same place. The head, however, was left on the tea table, which he could see as soon as he entered the courtyard. Russell, Go Monen followed him in. When he saw the head on the table, he suddenly cried out involuntarily. Dahai! He knelt in front of the tea table like a madman and stared at the man, whose eyes were still open. His gaze was sharp and piercing. Yi Zichen could tell that the man called Dahai had died a very strange death. Yi Zichen could tell from his gaze that he was very shocked when he died. While Go Monen was still calling out the man's name, Yi Zichen walked over and gently caressed Dahai's face, then helped him close his eyes. All right, he's already dead, so what's the point of shouting? Dahai! Go Monen sat down on the ground in pain. Yi Zichen did not even ask about their relationship, and merely muttered to himself as if he was telling a story. I've known Dahai since I was young. He was born a few years before me, and he has always treated me like an older brother. When I was young, my body was weak, so I was unable to cultivate. It was Dahai who stole books from his clan for me to read. After a long time, we both became Yao Kings. Before we entered, he even told me that if we were lucky, we might be able to become great Yao Kings when we leave. His biggest dream was to become a great Yao King. You have no idea how excited he was when the tomb opened, but it's all my fault. If I didn't run when I first saw that criminal, and instead fought him with my life on the line, then Dahai wouldn't have ended up like this. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Go-Monin continuously punched the ground, while Yi Zichen walked around the gazebo a few times. There weren't any obvious signs of a fight. If they had really fought over a treasure, then the signs would have been very obvious. Yi Zichen did not believe that anyone could instantly kill an Emperor-level expert. All Emperor-level experts had very high vigilance. Chapter 1631. The pain left as quickly as it had come. After leaving the hidden garden, Go-Monin's expression was no longer as pained as before. Although Yi Zichen still couldn't see his smile, he could sense that his emotions had stabilized considerably. In Go-Monin's own words, blindly suffering wouldn't change the outcome. He couldn't bring the sea back to life, so all he could do was avenge him. From this, Yi Zichen could tell that Go-Monin was a very rational person. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Zichen wasn't the last person to appear in the hallway. At the very least, he'd seen a few scattered experts enter the tomb. They were unfamiliar. From the looks of it, they were once reclusive seniors. After the tomb's collapse, they wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to fight for their lives before the end of the era. These seniors weren't as enthusiastic as Go-Monin. When they saw Yi Zichen and Go-Monin, they all stopped far away, looked at each other, nodded, then left. They weren't friendly. The way Yi Zichen saw it, they simply didn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble. Besides, the people who'd entered the tomb were scattered all over the place. The fact that Yi Zichen and Go-Monin were able to stand side by side meant they'd reached some sort of mutual understanding. If they approached the two of them rashly, it was hard to say what would happen. Recently, the perverted murderers had become more and more active. Over the past few days, more and more victims had appeared in the palace. As a result, everyone in the palace was anxious. If they didn't run into old friends, they'd assume anyone they saw was the cruel murderer. Bamboo Garden, 4th floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yi Zichen wanted to merge the 4th floor with the other spaces. That way, it'd be livelier with more people. If the Yao emperors were in a good mood, they might even give the other Yao servants some pointers. However, as soon as Yi Zichen suggested it, he refused. Yi Zichen had no choice but to send the divine, general-level Yao servants to the larger tribes. The 4th floor remained intact for the 3 great emperors to rest in. Now that the ruler Yao servants had left, the 4th floor was much quieter. Why are you in the mood to come here? Aren't you racing against time to plunder treasures? Song Xiong sat arrogantly on a chair and munched on a fruit several dozen centimeters long. He'd been like this ever since he'd led Yi Zichen out of the hallway. Seeing Yi Zichen made him even more cocky than before. From time to time, he would even raise his eyebrows at him, as if to say, "Isn't Master Xiong ruthless?" Yi Zichen also learned from Qinglong that the fruit Song Xiong ate every day was actually peaches. He liked the juice of peaches, so he ate a few every day. Yi Zichen had never seen such a huge peach before. Even in modern worlds, genetically modified peaches wouldn't be as big as 1/10 of this. It's too dangerous outside. Let's take shelter here. Song Xiong was the one who had brought Yi Zichen out of the hallway. At the end of the day, Yi Zichen owed him a favor. Seeing that Song Xiong was talking to him like this, he didn't argue with him like before. Instead, he smiled calmly. Unexpectedly, Song Xiong nodded and took a bite of the peach. Earlier, I also felt that the yin qi was a bit heavy. That's right. It was originally a tomb, but it just had to be made to look like a palace. There wasn't even a shadow of a ghost to be seen. Come to think of it, it's strange. Logically speaking, this kind of tomb should be full of traps, but the secret chamber with elixirs and treasures has no traps at all. Whoever comes here can just take it, said Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen hadn't been to many secret realms, but it was just as he'd said. Taking treasures wasn't easy. This Transcendence Mausoleum, the God Emperor's tomb, was truly bizarre. So long as you touched the pills, talismans, and treasures, they belonged to you. There were no traps at all. It could be said that this was a race against time. Whoever moved faster would get to the place where the treasure was placed first. The treasure would not be used. How could they accidentally fall into the hands of the first person? When they ran into other people, no one would try to steal the treasures. The palace was simply too vast. No one was around when you went to take the treasures, and no one would see you leave the room with the treasures. No one knew who had the treasures, but everyone seemed to have them. As a result, everyone seemed to have come to some sort of mutual understanding. When they saw something, they just nodded and passed it by. No one had any designs on the others. Perhaps the pills, treasures, and talismans weren't particularly valuable, so no one was willing to risk their lives for such petty gains. Based on what you're saying, shouldn't you be searching for treasures outside more often? Song Xiong's coarse voice boomed like thunder, hurting Yi Zichen's eardrums. We've pretty much scoured the outskirts of the palace. Right now, everyone's trying to find a way into the inner palace. Didn't I just say that it's too dangerous outside? My cultivation is the lowest among them. What if I die out here? Yi Zichen was speechless. Not being able to enter the inner palace was indeed the biggest problem faced by the experts who had entered the tomb. Strangely enough, during this time, Yi Zichen had scoured the outskirts of the palace. However, he hadn't run into Yang Jian or Gu Li. Gomonin had said that there were 4 outer palaces in total. They might be in the other palaces, but once he entered the inner palace, he might run into them. In order to find a way into the inner palace, the two of them split up. Considering Yi Zichen's low cultivation, Gomonin had him find a suitable location to ensure his safety. If he discovered anything, he'd return here to inform Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen was actually a bit embarrassed by such a considered arrangement. However, seeing Gomonin's solemn gaze, Yi Zichen nodded in agreement. He didn't know how long it would take for Gomonin to return. Yi Zichen silently took out a bottle of peach juice from his spatial ring. Just as Song Xiong was about to say something, he suddenly stopped. All of a sudden, Yi Zichen felt his vision darken. When he looked up, he saw a pair of bull's eyes staring straight at him, causing him to nearly cough up in fright. "What are you doing? Why didn't you share this with me earlier?" Song Xiong directly chucked the peach in Yi Zichen's hands to the side, then snatched the peach juice from Yi Zichen's hands like a thief. It was only a small bottle of juice, so even Song Xiong's mouth wasn't enough for him to drink a single mouthful. In the blink of an eye, the bottle was empty. Song Xiong continued to stare at the bottle, then licked his lips when he saw that it was truly empty. "Is there more? Give me some more." Song Xiong's gaze burned with passion. He was truly obsessed with peach juice. Yi Zichen thought back to what Qinglan had said before. Song Xiong liked peaches because he liked their juice. Why didn't I think of that? From Song Xiong's gaze, he would do anything as long as he was given juice. Although peach juice had already been mass-produced in the Heavenly Court, Yi Zichen couldn't make it seem too cheap. "You still have the nerve to say that? I only got this bottle of juice with great difficulty. I got the peach of immortality. Do you know? Peaches of immortality only appear once every several tens of thousands of years. It was such a small bottle, and I was prepared to drink it a few times. But you drank it all. Hurry up and compensate me." Yi Zichen had definitely put his emotions into it, and his acting skills had already reached the point of perfection. Although Song Xiong didn't know what the hell the Peach of Immortality was, he knew that it was definitely a treasure that was hard to get since it only appeared once every several tens of thousands of years. What's more, Yi Zichen's expression was truly pained. Thus, Song Xiong couldn't help but smile embarrassedly when he saw the bottle he had tossed to the ground. "Look at you, I just drank some juice. I have plenty of peaches. Lousy can just pluck as many as you want. Can your crappy peaches compare to the Peach of Immortality?" Yi Zichen glared. Song Xiong's peaches truly couldn't compare to the Peach of Immortality that only appeared once every several tens of thousands of years. The boorish Song Xiong didn't know what to do when he saw Yi Zichen's expression. He couldn't help but scratch his head. "Fine, I was wrong. Then, didn't I bring you out of the hallway earlier? How about we call it even?" Even, Yi Zichen twitched his mouth and put on an unwilling expression. However, he was already overjoyed in his heart. Song Xiong is like this with just a bottle of juice. It seems like I've found the blockhead's weakness. Since he's so passionate about juice, it'll be easy for me to make him do it in the future. As for Qinglan, he's definitely much stronger than Song Xiong, but he's always acted very indifferent and doesn't seem to like anything at all. "Brother Gu, are you there? You're lucky. I won't argue with you this time." Yi Zichen glared at Song Xiong, then left the bamboo garden. When the unreasonable Song Xiong saw Yi Zichen glare at him, he could only nod and smile coyly. When Yi Zichen disappeared from the fourth floor, he let out a long sigh and sat down, then looked at the bottle in front of him. I didn't expect this thing to be so expensive, but it tastes really good. Your brain is too simple. Can't you tell that you got screwed over by him? Qinglan shook his head with a smile. Hearing that, Song Xiong glared. Big brother Qinglan, what do you mean by that? You're saying that he lied to me just now? I don't know if the origin of this juice is real or not, but he definitely isn't telling the truth when he said that he ran out. He definitely wants to use this juice to keep you hanging. Let me ask you this. If he told you that the price for helping him was the juice just now, what would you choose? Qinglan asked. Yi Zichen licked his lips and recalled the taste of the juice. After drinking the juice, Song Xiong felt that the peaches were tasteless when he touched them. If Yi Zichen really wanted him to help out with the juice, then he probably wouldn't refuse. Song Xiong nodded. Qinglan couldn't help but smile when he saw Song Xiong nod. That's exactly it. I knew that kid was sneaky. That said, if he really wanted me to help out with the juice, then I wouldn't have lost out, said Song Xiong with a grin. Brother Gu. Go Monin returned to the rendezvous point and called out to Yi Zichen. At the same time, Yi Zichen emerged from the corner of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Chapter 1632. They'd found a way into the inner palace. Yi Zichen understood the importance of this information, so he followed Go Monin without hesitation. You know about this too? Yi Zichen couldn't help but arch his eyebrows. On the way, they'd encountered quite a few experts heading in the same direction. Judging from their solemn expressions, they were probably heading in the same direction as Yi Zichen. Go Monin scratched his head with an apologetic smile, then put on an honest expression. To tell you the truth, I wasn't the one who found the way into the inner palace. I heard about it from someone else, which is why I came back to tell Brother Gu. There's no need to be embarrassed. I'm already very happy that you came back to find me. Yi Zichen smiled. Yi Zichen chuckled. If it were anyone else, they might have gone over themselves when they heard this news. Why would they bother bringing along a burden? Brother Gu, don't underestimate yourself. I'm telling the truth. Cultivation. At the end of the day, it all came down to the difference in cultivation. Even if Yi Zichen hadn't been cultivating for long, becoming a ruler in just 100 years, and his talent was monstrous, the tomb didn't care about how long you'd cultivated, only your cultivation. Most of the people who came here were emperors, and some rulers had somehow gotten wind of this. Most of those who came here to try their luck died in the outer palace, or were trapped in the corridors. Yi Zichen was lucky to run into Go Monin. Otherwise, given his aura, there was no way those emperor-level experts would show him any mercy. After a few turns, Yi Zichen and Go Monin arrived at a palace. Brother Gu, do you still remember this place? Go Monin smiled. Of course Yi Zichen remembered. They'd been here before, so there were definitely treasures stored inside. However, it was clear that someone had been here before them and swept everything clean. Yi Zichen and Go Monin circled the place twice, but when they saw no treasures, they retreated. Yi Zichen hadn't expected them to return here. Based on Go Monin's information, there was a secret door leading to the inner palace. When he saw Yi Zichen nod, Go Monin chuckled. We were so focused on treasure hunting that we didn't even inspect the place properly. Look at these two statues. Go Monin pointed at the two stone statues in the palace. Earlier, Go Monin found it rather strange. These sort of stone statues were normally placed outside the gates, but these two were placed in the palace. Just as Yi Zichen was wondering what was so special about the two statues, Go Monin had already arrived in front of them and pushed them. The two stone statues retreated about 10 centimeters, and a door appeared in the middle of the two stone statues. There were steps at the bottom of the door. Before Yi Zichen could reach them, the experts who'd rushed into the palace disregarded everything else and ran down the stairs. This is, said Yi Zichen. Go Monin nodded repeatedly. Seeing that quite a few people had already left, he hurriedly urged Yi Zichen to hurry down as well. There weren't many steps in the secret passage. After walking for less than 100 steps, they found themselves in an empty secret chamber. The secret chamber was about the size of 3 football fields and there were many people with surging auras standing in the middle. Why are there so many people? Just as Yizichin was shocked by the number of people in the secret room, he heard a surprised laugh. Yizichin looked up and saw Yang Jian, the great sage, Pu Jingwan, and the sovereign of numinous treasure running towards him. Gu Li and the others followed them. "I've finally found you." Yang Jian laughed heartily, then turned to the monkey and scolded, "I told you Yizi would be fine. Why were you so worried?" "Who's the one who's worried?" The great sage rolled his eyes. Only now did Yizichin notice that there were 4 passages. In other words, everyone from the 4 palaces had gathered here. "Brother Yi?" Go Monin frowned at Yizichin. Yizichin knew his identity had been exposed, so he could only smile bitterly. "Monin, please don't take it to heart. Actually, my real name is Yizichin, so that's how it is. No wonder you didn't answer when I called you Brother Gu." Go Monin laughed heartily. "It's fine. It's understandable that you used a fake name under those circumstances. I'm glad you understand, Monin," laughed Yizichin. "Yizi, this is..." Yang Jian gestured at Go Monin. Yizichin took the opportunity to introduce him. "This is a Yao friend I met in the north, Go Monin. If it weren't for him, I might not have survived that damn place." After that, Yizichin introduced Yang Jian and the others to Go Monin. When it came to Gu Li, he hesitated for a moment, then decided to introduce them. "I didn't expect Brother Yi to have so many experts by your side. It seems you're no ordinary person. If I'm not mistaken, the Yizichin who changed the balance of power in the God realm and took over the 10th divine mountain is you, right?" Laughed Go Monin. When they first met, Go Monin had mentioned Yizichin, but Yizichin hadn't agreed right away. Now that Yang Jian and the others were by his side, there was no need to hide it. He nodded. "Haha, as expected. I never would have guessed I'd be so lucky as to make friends with someone like Brother Yi," said Go Monin. "It's my honor to meet you, Brother Monin," laughed Yizichin. After chatting for a long time, Yizichin, Yang Jian, and the others told each other about their encounters. Speaking of which, Yang Jian and the great sage were quite lucky. They'd landed in the same place. Although they didn't get along, if they joined forces, even a demon emperor would have to think twice before dealing with them. As a result, they practically swept through the area and plundered 70% of the palace's resources. Pu Jingwan ran into Gu Li and the others. She didn't know what sort of secret technique Gu Li had used, but the 4 of them had landed in the same palace, in the exact same location. For safety's sake, and within Lu's warm invitation, Pu Jingwan reluctantly agreed to go with them. Venerable numinous treasure. As soon as Yizichin asked, he realized his question was unnecessary. From the look in Venerable numinous treasure's eyes, he could tell that, given his cultivation, even 3 or 5 emperors wouldn't be able to kill him. "We're pretty lucky. We didn't suffer any casualties. Don't you know that even though there are so many people here, who knows how many people have died outside?" Yang Jian glanced at the people in the room. "Be careful. I'm afraid there's a psychopathic murderer inside." "You have one too?" Yizichin arched his brows. As soon as Yizichin said that, Pu Jingwan and then Lu glared at him. "You have one too?" Suddenly, Yizichin and the others glanced at each other. After a while, Yang Jian glanced at the Venerable of numinous treasure. The Venerable didn't say anything, but he nodded. His meaning was clear. This was clearly a sealed space, but for some reason, Yang Jian felt a cold wind blow past his neck. There were psychopathic murderers all over the palace. This was a little terrifying. "I never would have guessed there were 4 of them." Go Monin suddenly gnashed his teeth and cursed. The others didn't quite understand why he was acting like this, so Yizichin explained on his behalf. That psychopathic murderer killed one of his brothers. The others understood, and they looked at Go Monin sympathetically. "There's no need to look at me like that. I can't just let Dahai's death go. That psychopathic murderer is probably in this room as well. Don't let me find him. If I find him, I'll definitely avenge my brother." Go Monin roared viciously. The other people in the secret room also gathered in groups of 2s and 3s. From their words, it could be heard that they were also talking about that psychopathic murderer. Clearly, that psychopathic murderer had left a deep shadow in their hearts. Although everyone here was an emperor-level expert. The ones who died were all at least that level. Even imperial emperors hadn't been able to escape. From this, it was clear that this psychopathic murderer's cultivation wasn't low. Furthermore, no one had ever seen his true face. A murderer standing in front of you with a knife in his hand wasn't scary. What was scary was the person standing in the shadows. 4. I don't think that's necessarily true. The venerable of numinous treasure suddenly laughed. Everyone looked at him, but they didn't quite understand what he meant. Could it be that there were more than 4? Before anyone could say anything, the venerable of numinous treasure said something astonishing. The way I see it, it might just be 1. 1. Everyone's eyes widened. Yang Jian was speechless. What the hell are you talking about? We ran into psychopathic murderers in all 4 palaces, and you're talking about 1. Does that person have a clone? He needs a clone? The venerable of numinous treasure sneered. Then explain it to me, Yang Jian said. Isn't this the best place to explain it? The venerable of numinous treasure looked around the room. This room leads to the 4 outer palaces, which means that the murderer could have used it to get to the other palaces and carry out his plan. A heavy cloud suddenly enveloped everyone's hearts. If that really was the case, why would he do that? Pu Jingwan asked. The venerable of numinous treasure made an expression as if he didn't know either. This was all just his speculation. He wasn't that psychopathic murderer, so how could he possibly know all the details? There's something wrong with his brain. He found this secret room and didn't go to the inner palace. Instead, he killed people. I don't really believe it. Yang Jian sneered. The venerable of numinous treasure didn't retort. He'd already analyzed everything he could. Whether he believed it or not wasn't his problem. Enough. Let's not think about that psychopathic murderer anymore. It doesn't matter if it's 4 or just 1. As long as we stick together and don't split up, no matter how many they send, they can't do anything to us. Yi Zichen changed the subject at an opportune time. There should be people in all 4 palaces. Did you run into the demon emperor, the god emperor, and the others? We ran into the demon emperor, said Gu Li, who'd been pretending to listen. Gu Li, who'd been pretending to listen all this time, suddenly spoke up. I even greeted him in a friendly manner. God Emperor, we didn't meet.